Representative Duncan,
Here, we just now got volume, sorry.
Representative Ayer, Representative Greer,
Here.
Representative McGuire, Representative Roscoe, Representative Yin,
Here.
Chairman Driscoll, Chairman Zwanser.
Here.
Committee's all present.
Little as possible.
All right, sorry for that brief pause. We're still technically on the redistricting topic from yesterday. So let's finish that out before we'll approve minutes later this morning before we kick off our second part of the meeting when it comes to our corporation's agenda outside of redistricting. So with that, Mr. Co-Chair, good morning. You can have the floor.
Thank you. I'm just going to make a brief proposal to the committee, and it doesn't require a vote now or anything, but we're all pretty raw from yesterday. It got emotional, it got hard, and it's going to continue to do that. We have 3 plans laying on the desk in front of us, and I know there's a 4th one coming from Representative Yen. And I would suggest that all the plans get presented without large amounts of passionate debate. Just lay them out and lay the facts and the bases out. And then we hold another meeting somewhere towards before Christmas and get a chance to take these 4 plans back. They all, at least in my region, they make substantial changes to what all the public meetings were. And I'd like to be able to go back to my county commissioners, my clerks, and my constituents and find out what they like and what they don't like so that we honestly can come back without it being my opinion or your opinions. But I spent a lot of time on the phone last night, and I don't think that there's a whole lot of give right now between a lot of the parties. And I think it requires a little bit of cooling off period and some time to think about what's good and what's bad. So that's my hopes and my thoughts. I have to leave this morning, so you can probably get it done without me regardless. I don't care. Actually, I do care, but it's probably done better without me. But I do think for all of us, it's better if we have some time to sleep on it, talk to our people, because I participated in a lot of regional plans, listened in on them. There's some changes for different people that I think ought to be talked over and thought about. Thank you.
Senator Scott.
In addition, I've got 3 different sets of figures here that I would guess are showing Senate districts and showing a number of them outside the 5% deviation. I don't think any of the plans are quite ready for prime time. The deviations are small enough, so I think they're mostly dealable with a little refinement. But that says to me, we don't have anything that we are in position to really vote on.
I guess we can certainly have open comment and discussion this morning, committee, before taking a step on any motion. I guess from my perspective, it's now December 1st. We said we'd actually have a plan that we would submit to the legislature by December 1st, 3 months ago. We have not gotten to that point. We are now, I'm not even sure if we're any closer than we were yesterday, quite honestly. So until we actually make a tough decision in my mind and put a plan out, love it or hate it, as a starting point for us to take back to our districts and, I don't know, our other elected officials, mayors, commissioners. I feel like most of us have talked to those and had public meetings and know generally the thoughts that we're represented to elect from our constituencies. I mean, that's why they elect us, to make these decisions on their behalf. That I would at least like something out of this committee today that's a statewide rough draft plan that we could take back. And then if you don't like a certain area, certain districts, you can substitute those out, whether that's 2 district swap, whether that's a county, whether that's a 5 county, whether that's half the state. Having something on paper so the rest of the state knows where we are. I still see it as kind of 4 distinct regions: the east, that kind of central line block of Johnson, Sheridan, Natrona, Albany, the south and the west, and then the basin and Fremont. It's kind of how I see the world. But I would certainly appreciate leaving this meeting with something that says, hey, here's a preliminary map that we're working from. We currently have the Scott plan. We've tried to put that on paper. I think that was close to my co-chairman's request yesterday to have a plan that was reflective of what we've been working on when you try to piece this all together that we've had now for over 68 days. Trying to piece it together, I think, is the next step, and there will be conflicts. I would continue to push that we have something that's a statewide plan that we can take back and say, hey, if we do this over here, it affects the chain somewhere. So that would be my hope. Other discussion before we kick off motions or any plan? Representative Blackburn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have deep respect for everybody that sits on this committee, but we came here to do a job. We didn't come here to tuck our tails and go home. If that's what everybody wants, I got a lot of more fun things to be doing than sitting here. But I thought we came here to decide in these 2 days some direction. And I don't see any direction. All I see is confusion. And I'm confused. So personally, I think we need to stay the course. We need to get this done as best we can so that when we do go home, we have something that we can tell our constituents that we've done. Otherwise, we can just tell them we've done nothing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, so go ahead, Ripon Clausen.
So, Mr. Chairman, I went and slept on this, and I'm kind of glad I did. So in these conflict areas, I think we were making the same mistake that people have been in these shoes since the beginning of time, putting lines on paper, divisions of power, and splitting it up, and whether you want to call it, remove the names, right? Remove the titles of counties, poor county, rich county. Well, it goes back to race. We made that illegal. But if you look at the history of this from the beginning of the world till now, what we learned is we as a nation, we shouldn't split things by race, right? We learned that mistake and we made those laws federally. And we're trying to decide these by resources, division of resources, whatever. I think we go about this through a different lens. So in these conflict areas, I think it's really easy to come to say, okay, we want to split this rich county, poor county, however it works. I think we go through a lens of diversity. So if we take these places where there's conflict, and I only think there's 3, and we make them as diverse as possible instead of the divisions, I think we have this solved. So I think if we look at it through that lens, I think we have this sewed up and we can go home today with a state plan.
So we do have a couple of hours in the agenda, so let's take it slow and we can see where we are as we go. But I think it would be at least a good first step to ask Mr. Swank to go through the work he's done on our behalf since last night, what's on the website for the public to see, kind of where we are from a workload standpoint of LSO and where the conflicts remain on maps in front of us. So Mr. Swank, if you would take 5 minutes, update us on the website and some work you've done last night and where you think we might be.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, one moment. May I get the screen share, please? Thank you. Mr. Chairman, sorry. Last night, my understanding was I was to provide 2 statewide maps for the committee. The first one was basically to provide all the information, background information related to the statewide plan that Chairman Zawanitzer presented to the committee. And that is kind of titled Statewide Plan Compilation Number 1. It's based off of Chairman Zwanitzer's 11 district plan submission. It utilizes the Campbell County Region 6 plan that stays within deviation and proposes some sort of sharing out of Weston County. And the Senator Boner Region 7 plan with some modifications because of that Region 6 plan. So that was kind of the base. And then we fit in the other districts, the other regional plans, all submitted except for Region 10, which was their option 2 that was proposed to be added to this plan. So that's the summary of what the first compilation is. And you should have in your packet, you should have 3 documents. The first one would say statewide plan on the front, number 1, and then it has the deviations and population for each of the districts with highlights of the districts that are below or above the 5% deviation benchmarks. And then you should have a map. Apologize, we could not get this printed on a larger piece of paper this morning, but that was my fault. But that should be your first option to look at. The second one was the motion proposed by Senator Driscoll and passed yesterday, and it was to, I guess the term was used, snap in plans that have minimal or limited conflicts with other regions. So this basically means we brought in Region 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as presented that had prior no conflicts with anybody else. So that was Region 1's plan from the county clerk, Region 2 from Albany County, Region 3 from Natrona County, option 1, Region 4, Fremont County, 5, which was Sheridan and Johnson. They only had one option. 6 was Senator Driscoll's and the Weston County clerk's plan to keep all districts in Region 6 in the region and would be above deviation. Region 7 was to utilize Senator Boner's plan with no modifications because that does not go into Region 1 or Region 6. Region 8, which is the basin plan, and Region 9, 10, there was 2, I guess, comments made yesterday. One was to leave 9, 10 blank because there's a conflict related to Albany County. So what I did is I actually showed you what it looks like with and without Region 9 and 10 completed. So map 2 provides the version requested with 9 and 10 just showing the county boundaries. It does not show the districts. And then 2A shows Region 10's option 1 plan with Rock River taken out of House District 47. That's because Region 2 already had that allocated. What that does is it brings House District 47 down to about 88, 90 in terms of population, which lowers its deviation to about 7, I believe it's minus 7.3 or something like that. That should be shown in your, so your 2 other items in your packet would be option 1 or option 2, which I apologize, I forgot to print the title, so it's handwritten on there. Should say comp plan or comp map 2 on top. And that shows the one with just the counties for Region 9 and 10. And then 2A shows you what it would look like with the option 1 from Region 10 with Rock River taken out of that district. And then if you look on those data sheets in front, it should show you that the House District 47 on 2A actually is at minus 7.58. And I believe Senator Scott mentioned that showing that would kind of indicate where that district would need to go in terms of balancing the remainder of that region if it wanted to get it above deviation.
And Mr. Swank, could you click on that link for me just so people watching could?
Sorry, which one?
You're currently on 3, so that'd be fine.
Okay.
Just the one you're currently on.
Thank you. Sorry. What I did want to indicate also is, so in all 3 versions, Region 8, the basin, shows all their districts below deviation because they only had 1 submission. In the first one, the Zwanitzer submission, again, all Region 8 districts are below deviation. There is one that I missed prior. It's House District 10 is just slightly below deviation, which was drawn into Goshen County. It's at 9103. It's about 30 people short of 5%. And then so that would be, and then, so if I go back, I just want to make sure you knew what the coding was on those sheets. If you go to the second plan, or show this one up there, it shows the counties in shadow, or basically the outline. Again, this one, I believe it shows the basin below deviation and the Region 6 counties above deviation. And that's where you get the range of roughly 12% from top to bottom. In the last one, because of what we do to Region 9 and 10 and House District 47, that range of deviation is between 13 and 14%. Because you go from minus 7.58 up to almost 6+ in Region 6. That's kind of a broad view of the three versions provided this morning, and I stand for questions.
Senator Scott, question.
Chairman, I didn't understand the last three things you said.
Okay. I'm
I'm
not sure.
sorry. I'm trying to track back and forth between something new and listen to you at the same time. I just didn't get it.
I'm not sure which
Which-
three items. Can you?
You
ask
said
me a
something about a region.
Okay.
that
Mr.
was-
Chairman? Senator Scott, so if we just go 1 through 2A, I'll just do that simply. I was trying to get the highlights. So if you go to the Plan 1, this is the one provided yesterday. This has all districts within deviation except for Region 8 and the Region 10 on the corner in the southwest. Those are all below 5%. House District 10, sorry.
Okay.
And the Region 8 is the basin, the 6 counties in the basin.
Okay.
So that's the first option that was discussed yesterday. Do you have any questions on that?
That I understood.
Okay.
The-
Thank you for slowing me down.
The,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, you said something about a Region 6 being out of deviation in one of the
Okay,
plans.
correct.
Which is Region 6? Where is it out of deviation?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, thank you. If you go to the Region 2 map, this was the second map proposed yesterday evening by the committee. Region 6 is Campbell County, Crook County, and Weston County. The version brought into this map was the submission 2 from that region, and it has all districts in Region 6 staying within the region and maintaining that above deviation population. And it ranges from about 5.6 above to about 6% above.
Okay,
And that should be the packet you have that should say Comp Map 2 on the top.
map, this map 2. Region.
And then 2A is the same as Comp Map 2, just with Region 9 and 10, which is the southwest 6-county region, Lincoln, Teton, Sublet, Uinta, Harbin, and Sweetwater, with that filled in. And that provides the greatest range of deviation due to taking Rock River out of House District 48 or 47, pardon me. Does that help?
Representative McGuire, you have a question while we're all pondering that?
I do. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Would you please take a look at the legend on the map pages where it has proposed house district and it has the pins in different colors? I apologize, but I don't even want to presume what that might be. So if you could explain that to us, please.
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, those pins are corresponding to the colors of the districts on the map. So there's two differences. Those pins show the district colors for proposed districts, and then they show in a blue, just a flat blue color for all the labels. It's just the way that Google Maps brought in the information.
And I would say online, if you have it pulled up, you can click on each of those and it will give you the deviation and point out it's much easier when you have a web-based platform in front of you because you can click on each tab and it'll go to that district and give you the deviation.
So if you look at the screen, it'll show you, if you expand all the districts, you can go under, hit 14, and it'll just take you to that district on the map. And it shows you the kind of metadata for that map. It shows you the population for this district in this plan is 9278. And then it goes down with all the other information. It is a little bit hard to correspond the kind of the pin colors to the map colors because they're not consistently the same. I mean, they're the same color, they're just in a different, at a different scale.
And then, Mr. Swink, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you said there might be a fourth plan coming. And I don't know who that's from, but if anybody in the committee wants to talk about it, conceptually what it might be, certainly happy to hear it if you want to, Representative Yen, since people are looking at you. If you're not ready to present that, certainly understand.
No, Mr. Chairman, I mean, it was just a map that I drew based on a thought that was floated yesterday. I probably won't make a motion, but other people are more than willing to do it. It just centered around a district that was Weston County and Niobrara County. And that would mean Crook County still goes into Campbell and then Campbell dips into Converse County. So I drew a map and I floated it by some of the legislators in the committee. And if they want to make a motion on it, they're more than willing to do so.
Representative Driscoll?
Mr.
Chairman
thank
Driscoll.
you. I think map's been sent to Mr. Swank. If we can get some copies of it, because it's pretty hard to, this is exactly why I talked about another meeting. It's pretty hard to sit here on a chair.
Yeah.
And make decisions. You guys all talked about making decisions now and we agreed to it. Truth is, what we agreed to is multiple more meetings, and that's, I think rash decisions don't make sense. So I'd like to see us talk about these plans, but I can tell you for me, and I am leaving, so it's not because I'm leaving, but it's pretty dang hard to put up 4 plans and in a 30-minute time frame make a hard decision without looking at the tables that go with them, where we're out of variance and where we're going to be.
I believe this is the plan. I just received the email, so I'll let Representative Ian if he wants to explain.
Would you mind walking us through it, Representative Yen? Just so
Sure.
all options and thoughts from the table?
Yeah, so this is just you could even conceive of it as an amendment to Swanitzer's map that he showed the other day. Essentially, it just has Crook County in a Campbell County district where it's majority Crook, and then a Weston Niobrara district because that's basically an ideal district population. The Campbell and Converse borders, so Campbell would then, because it has population taken from it by Crook, would have to dip into Converse. I just drew some borders that relatively fit precinct lines, but I don't know the community of interest well enough compared to the folks in Converse and Campbell County to make those decisions. So it's just to be able to see the idea on paper, and those borders could be adjusted accordingly.
Before I get to Senator Boner, I think the whole committee agrees, and if you don't, let me know, that if we go with a statewide plan that shares districts between counties, that we are all agreeable to those counties getting back together, seeing where those lines, kind of agreeing on, let's say, a number, give or take 50 constituents, and drawing those lines along the communities of interest that county sees best, I think is what Representative Yin said, and I've heard that yesterday. So I want to make sure that's out in the public, that if we go with a statewide map today, we're all certainly agreeable to those lines being drawn within that county, how that county wants them. Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I appreciate the work of Representative Yen. I went back and did a similar, I guess, calculation in that. Obviously, it wasn't my idea to split Commerce County 4 different ways, but which I didn't even think was possible, but apparently it is. But the idea being that you have a House district centered around Weston and Niobrara County, and then you basically have Campbell, Crook, Converse work together to sort of further divide House seats. And obviously, the conclusion I came to is you have to do the whole east side of the state. Clearly, there's a serious conflict in Region 6. And I think whether path we move forward, we're going to need to have Region 6 and Region 7 work together. And that would, of course, the challenge with that is that, we're right up at a pretty hard limit in Laramie County with, being right at that plus 5% deviation. So I also have a conceptual plan, I guess, and once again, recognizing that we're all going to go back and continue to draw lines. That would basically be a modified version of the motion that Representative Swanser made last night to move an entire full House seat from Regions 9 and 10 to what I understood was basically Laramie County. But obviously it would affect the entire east side of the state. So what happens when you do that in committee? I did send you an email. Obviously, it's very conceptual, but it does even out the population deviations between the west and east side of the state along I-80, basically regions 9 and 10 going into Albany and Laramie County. It does create a split house district between Albany and Laramie County, but eliminates one between Sweetwater and Carbon County, which has a good chance of eliminating or reducing the geographic size of Representative Paxton's current seat, which would be another benefit. So near as I can tell, it's probably a wash in terms of number of house seats that get split between counties. It evens out the population deviations, which are significant between regions 9 and 10 and Laramie County in particular. And it reflects serious population shifts that we've seen along the I-80 corridor. And so that's very conceptual, but if we could agree to at least try to pursue that idea, that would give us the flexibility we need in regions 6 and 7 to potentially move 1,000 to 2,000 people from the south side of our region into Laramie County if that becomes necessary. And based off the rough calculations I did based off of this notion, that would probably become necessary. So another very conceptual idea I'd like to share with the committee and with the public, but someone that I think would, nobody gets everything what they want. No, we're not dealing with whole numbers. We're talking with half house seats. I think that's where, if we're going to compromise, that's where it's going to be. And so I think we're past the point, like I said, working with full numbers and full counties, and we have to come to some compromise somewhere. So it's another concept I'd like to share.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, and I have a further problem. We've been looking entirely at house districts. And I think particularly the one you labeled Compilation Plan 1, I can't see a way that can be worked into a Senate plan that can or should pass the Senate. So I think we're going to have to look at both House and Senate, and maybe the decision is to abandon the current nesting concept and do them on different principles. That does have some advantages and has some disadvantages, but if we're going to stay comparable, I certainly couldn't support anything that was based on that plan.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Chairman Swanitzer. Senator Scott, and other members of the committee, in trying to understand all of our positions, what I am frustrated with, and maybe what the public probably is too, is we're not explaining why we don't like it or what the concern might be. So Senator Scott, I heard you say that you don't think it could pass the Senate, and it's not good for the Senate. One, the plan doesn't actually identify how this works with the Senate, certainly is a profound concern. But if you could perhaps explain so the public understands and the whole committee's on the same page.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Fair comment. The problem you've got with the Senate, you've moved a House district from the southwest corner clear across I-80 to Laramie County. So you have an extra half a Senate district in Laramie County. You're short a half a Senate district in the southwest corner. If you're going to match those up, you have to roll the thing so that you have a Senate district that is half in Laramie County, half in Albany County, one Senate district that apparently would be the interior part of Albany County, and then another Senate district that is half in Albany County and half in Carbon County, and then another one that is half in Carbon County, half in Sweetwater County, just to get over to where you need the other half. And that creates a bunch of districts that are very difficult to represent because they're half and half. Whereas the other plan does not do that, has those communities self-contained. And I think, I'm not quite clear, I think the consequence, it would certainly mean that a bunch of senators would have their terms abbreviated and have to run in the middle of a term. There's some constitutional problem with that if you can avoid it. Never been tested in the courts, so there's no precedent on it. But clearly the Constitution does say it's a 4-year term. You would get opposition from that. You would get opposition from your giving, creating some districts that are very difficult to represent because they're half in 2 very different counties, different populations, different communities, and those are difficult to represent. And I think I also looked at trying to go north and roll it that way. And you get into a possibility because if you stay north, you mess up the Lander area considerable. And I think that would stop you from getting through that way. It just is mechanically a different thing because of the distances between where you've got the extra half district needed in the southeast corner and the existing district with just half a senator in the southwest corner. And mechanically, that gets to be a very difficult thing to do.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Please do, Senator Endicott.
Mr. Chairman, wonderful. Senator Scott, I've heard 2 primary issues there. One is constitutional concerns regarding perhaps, prematurely ending a senator's 4-year term. Potentially, I would be one of those. Does LSO have an answer to that of how the legislature has historically handled that for the Senate and 4-year terms and altering a senator's district that's midterm, and how that has historically been handled? Looking for answers from our attorneys, actually from LSO. I know many of us pretend to be those, but LSO?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Endicott, I think, and I don't know historically exactly how it's gone. I do know we've gotten an opinion from the Attorney General that essentially the legislature could go either way, could require the full Senate to run again, or as has happened last time, just kept the districts the same and only half the Senate was required to run. But it seemed to be up to the legislature in passing the bill if they would require the full Senate to run or not.
Let me throw some questions at you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to tag on that, Josh, if I could.
Okay, go ahead, Senator Case.
The question was brought up in litigation 10 years ago, but the court threw that piece out. I think by the time the court got to it, it was a moot question. So, but that was asked in the lawsuit 10 years ago.
Sure, go ahead.
It's on. Mr. Chairman, further in the history of it, in 1965, I believe there was a major change where you went from a 27-seat Senate to a 30-seat Senate. And there had been, each county had been a Senate district with extra senators in Laramie County and Natrona County, went to a district system, and that forced the full Senate to run again. Clearly, meeting the federal constitutional mandate trumped the state constitutional provision. In 1990, where we were forced to single-member district, not by a court decision, but by governor's veto. When you did that, you changed the thing so much that as a practical matter, you had to. And again, if you didn't, you couldn't meet the one man, one vote rule. So you had a federal constitutional reason That's lacking this year. I don't see it, but if we were to adopt a plan that radically changed Senate districts all across the state, you would have to, one that changed all the ones along the I-80 corridor. Would you or would you not? I don't know. I don't think anybody's ever considered the situation where 2/3 of the state would be fine and a third wouldn't be. That's unknown territory.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Sure, go ahead, Senator Case, and we're going to get to you, Mr. Anderson, eventually. Go ahead.
part of this unknown territory as well is in this cascading of senators, which I actually kind of like this plan. And I'm okay with everybody running again. You will probably find when you actually roll it out, because a particular senator lives in one of the two House districts, can't live in both of them. So you may find that when you combine and do it, the two sitting senators are in the same Senate district. You know, you'd have to fight it out and then be another reason to have an election. But both probably couldn't remain. I'm okay with this too.
Mr. Anderson, any more background? And can you tell me what year that Attorney General opinion came out? Is it a recent or how old is it?
Mr. Chairman, I'll have to follow up with that. I don't remember exactly when that was, but I'll find that. I also just wanted to note that we are, looking into this issue. We've gotten some questions about, how this would apply. I think right now you have to be in your seat on January 1st. In this case, we won't even have potentially these seats even existing on January 1st. And so we're looking into, what we can find on that. And so there will be a memo forthcoming on this issue, but I just want to let you know we are considering this, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Nethercott, round two.
Thank you. So the second concern that I have, that I heard from Senator Scott is, how the Senate districts roll out. So Chairman's Monitor, did you contemplate the Senate districts? And if so, how does that look? And how many Senate seats would be disrupted? And is it sincerely the House's position that you want every single senator to run again? And you think that's in the best interest of the state at this time? I've certainly heard that rumor to be true, but let's just put it out there if that's really what we're asking to happen. And let's address that issue as well.
Okay, Senator Nethercott, I feel like you're asking for my opinion and my perspective. Yep. So on my plan, let me first caveat it with, I saw this problem the first week. And so I came with a 56-28 plan that wouldn't have this problem. Just wanted to put that out there. But now that we have this problem and we're finally here on December 1st, as I look at Senate districts and I look at the map that I've presented, that the counties have presented, there are 7 different counties in the state that I think, and I don't live in any of these counties besides one of them, but I look at this map and I know where people live, and I can tell you that I am not happy whatsoever with how some of these maps were drawn, because I know they look funny because I know where people live. And I don't think it's in the best interest of those constituents in those communities, but that's their own legislators' concern. So on that personal level, I think every senator should run again, because I think several legislators and senators have done some interesting things with drawing districts to keep themselves in a certain district. In my own community, and trying to draw maps, we found it very difficult. There are 2 senators who live 19 blocks from each other. We've tried to draw maps that make it so that they don't have to be districted, and we're still working on that, but it's tough. And so I do think when you look at 15 senators that have to run again anyway, and we're looking at, when I can look at this map, that another 6, depending on the northeast corner of the state, if we redistrict the northeast corner, like my co-chairman here, actually either way, you're going to have 2 senators when we renest look a little funny, and I'm counting 22 of the 30 then that are 7 in competitive districts with each other, and the 15 who have to run. It would make sense to me to make everyone run again. Am I going to push that? I don't think so. I think I've talked with my co-chairman. We've had a lot of conversations that say, if we can draw 60 House seats, I am more than comfortable on letting the Senate nest their districts how they want, and I will stay out of the way and encourage the House to stay out of the way on how the senators want to nest House districts. But it is difficult for me to look at the map and look at the population changes and look at the districts that have come in and say it's not a good idea for about 5 of our state senators to want to run again. And at that point, it just seems fair to make everyone run again, yes, in my opinion. So if it was my vote, I'd say all senators run again. But that's my opinion, and I'm one, and I'm not going to push it at any great level, but since you asked. Tyree, and then we'll get to Representative McGuire.
Yeah, I heard you loud and clear on the issue of senators running again. What I didn't hear was how do we deal with the half of a senator with half a district in the western side and half a senator with half a district on the eastern side, put them together. How do you propose to put them together?
And so, I mean, there are 2 ways, and I mentioned them both yesterday, right? So way number 1, in my opinion, is because I continue to look at this line block. It makes no sense to share Senate in Johnson or Sheridan, right? Because it ricochets into Natrona. So your 2 points from east to west in the state would be Natrona having to co-share 2 senators with the House district in Converse County and a House district in probably northern Carbon. So that would be option 1, which you have 4 senators in Natrona County now. This would guarantee 3 and you'd have a 50-50 shot at 2 more. I don't know if that's palatable in Natrona County or not. I think as Natrona County grows, the weight would be in your favor over 10 years. The other option is certainly through Albany County, splitting the Albany County House districts, 1 into Western Laramie County and 1 into Carbon. And that would be interesting, depending on how the map goes with Laramie County, because we might gain an 11th seat, but we would only be guaranteed 4.5 senators. I think that's a compromise that if push came to shove, I would be okay with having to share a House district with Albany County. But those are the 2 ways that I can see it working, is you either have to share that connectivity through Natrona or through Albany, adding a 21st House member under a 60-30 plan. Representative McGuire was next, and then Senator Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I like our senators in Natrona County, so I'm just throwing that out. But my question is for you is mechanically, do you anticipate that there will be one bill that starts out and starts in one house and then crosses over? Or are we anticipating that there will be multiple bills starting at the same time? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, in conversations with leadership, we will have one bill. I don't think any decision has been made on whether it will start in the House or the Senate. It doesn't make any sense to have more than one bill because the other body would probably sit on it. And we're gonna, I mean, in a perfect world, we wouldn't go to conference committee, but I'm guessing we'll have amendments. So my hope would be have a bill that this committee submits to the legislature a month in advance. Hopefully, as you heard, by January 1st. I do believe we have 4 legislators I've talked to that it does make a difference. Several legislators own more than one house, and they may make some decisions on where they might want to live and run, from what I understand, as weird as that sounds, especially in our larger communities. So we will have a bill that we present as a committee bill, go to one of the 2 houses, and then amendments will be brought in both houses. I don't see any, you could have any member bring a bill for redistricting, I would imagine, but it would have to pass a 2/3 threshold. And I'm pretty optimistic that the legislature is united in one bill. Josh.
Mr. Chairman,
Look at the
and
Constitution.
Speaker just reminded me, but the redistricting bill does not need a 2/3 vote for introduction.
Mr. Chairman, some legislators do the House and the Senate completely separately. They don't have nesting.
16 of us nest of the 50.
I like nesting. I think it's good for the voters. I think it's a good thing. But one way that you could conceivably with nesting, you need to have one bill, begin in one house and proceed to the other. And that, at least there could be other plans, but one committee bill, we need to. If you didn't have nesting and you broke from nesting, and then you could conceivably let each house decide their membership in 2 separate bills and go from there. So I'm not saying that's a good idea. I'm just saying it's not lock stock that it has to be one bill.
But Senator Case, it would have to go through both bodies. So if we had a separate Senate map and a separate House map, you would have the opposing chamber have to
Yes.
decide to be agreeable to allowing that to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely true. And we're not talking about mirror bills, we're talking about totally separate bills, so. But I don't think that's a good idea. I think we're actually probably closer than we think. I think the Senate issue is going to be kind of key. And we ought to hear from people about that. You know, and here, I'm the poor person to talk. I'm up for election anyway. And half the Senate is. It's the people that aren't up for election. It would, you see that?
Yeah.
You see that? So, but also the displacement issue, when you start repackaging Senate districts, and if we're going to do it, let's do it for the basin too. Let's really think about all the challenges we need to do. And then all the senators would run. There would be a big Senate shuffle. And there would be situations where sitting senators end up in the same Senate district. But everybody's going to run. So, I mean, that should be, in a way, the House plans fit easier than the Senate plan, right? But we've all just talked about the House plan so far. And so you got this pressure cooker kind of thing hanging over everybody. And I'm just saying, let the gas out and have a free-for-all in the Senate side to sort it all out.
Senator Boner, and then we'll go to Representative Yin, but go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that is useful, but I think Senator Ellicott suggestion is useful to be more specific why we have problems with certain maps and you know, be specific and be honest. And yeah, I guess piggybacking off the previous speaker, I did mention the anger, the disillusionment in Goshen County due to the way that county got split up at the last minute. I just have to point out that was the result of two senators being in the same district. There's a reason why that had to happen at the last minute. It's because this committee 10 years ago thought that would be a good idea. And so when I look at, say, map 1, I'm concerned about that exact same situation playing out again between Laramie and Goshen County. Or alternatively, we have another Senate district based off my personal experience and experience of my constituents. It goes from Douglas to Devil's Tower, which is completely disenfranchises thousands of people in a community that is in fact growing. Maybe not doesn't have a population of some areas down here, but it is growing. So I just want to be very specific with those concerns. It does come down to the Senate. I think the House, we have to have the discussion on the House districts first as a practical matter, but at the end of the day, we have to have a plan that's going to work for both chambers. I think that's Senator Scott's point too. And so I just want to be very clear why I have why I just can't quite support this plan 1, which I have to say has my name on it, but it doesn't have any of the lines I drew on it. So just so we're clear. So I think that's a useful exercise to say specifically what our concerns are, because that's the only way to move forward with a compromise.
And real quick, we probably, for the 3 compilation maps, you probably should just have my name on the first one, and then maybe Chairman Driscoll's name on the second. So, yeah, because I don't want members of the public. I mean, because truly Senator Boner was not completely involved in the compilation. It was a planned compilation without his involvement or consent. Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, so I just had a follow-up question for LSO based on the thought that we don't need a 2/3 for a redistricting plan. If someone comes with a personal redistricting plan bill, does it require a 2/3 vote, or is it also exempt from that?
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, Article 3, Section 48, state census says in sentence 2, notwithstanding any other provision of this article, any bill to apportion the legislature may be introduced in a budget session in the same manner as in a general session.
We'll start with Senator Scott and then go to Representative McGuire.
In fact, in 1992, it was one of those that passed.
The sponsor's name was?
It was mine. It didn't have any of my stuff in it, but what happened was the governor vetoed the committee bill for not being single member district. And I had a backup bill in. That's what passed. So yes, that is the way it happened. It theoretically could happen again.
That was before the Constitution.
But the constitutional amendment was based on that experience.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and that was a great segue. As we move forward, one of the things that will be going on in my mind is one of the strengths that we have here in Wyoming with our citizen legislature is that we do have people who are willing to stay and bring back that experience and that institutional knowledge. And I know that we heard the term free for all and massive. Well, we had that one time before when term limits were here, and it was not good for the legislature, in my opinion. So I hope that we move forward in a manner that, you know, we respect our Senate colleagues as well as our House colleagues, and that we move forward in a way that's best for the people of the state of Wyoming. So, you know, I know everybody's here with the best intent, but that'll be in the back of my mind, is that I think that we have strength in the knowledge that we have in the body. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, committee, let's keep going. Senator Case.
This is so great because you can see how we could do this in a special session. It'd be so easy. We just get everybody together and we just hammer it out, the special session.
Representative Duncan, your hand's up online. Turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question, I don't know whether it goes to Josh or the committee, but if, say, we had a scenario where where all of the senators had to rerun, what do we do about those that still have 2 to 3 years left on their term? Because you couldn't start everybody over. I'm assuming you wouldn't start everybody over from scratch with 4 years, because they stagger now. So what does that look like? Because
So, Mr. Chairman, we had lots the first time. So there was lots drawn. So basically, heads, it's even districts, tails, it's odd districts. You flip a coin in some official manner. It's done by lot, and some senators will run and have 2-year terms. Some senators will run and have 4-year terms. You may have to do it again in 10 years.
And I would just say the issue that we also have not talked about when it comes to Senate districts and who runs again is right now it's based on the Senate district number. And so as we move some Senate districts around, depending on the number you're in, you may have a necessity to run. And so I haven't even thought about that until just now, that there's going to be another game on what the numbered Senate seats are, because that will let people stay in and what people will have to run and only do a 2-year term. So there's a lot of complications with this plan and the Senate on how we nested and what it looks like. And I think if we just say everyone runs again, it takes away that another layer of gamesmanship. But again, I'll leave that to the Senate. Senator Boner.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I think it's worth pointing out some basic like civics 101. There's a reason why we have 4-year terms in the Senate, right? The House is supposed to be more responsive to the people. The Senate's supposed to be more longer looking, more less concerned, right, with the passions of the moment and more concerned with long-term viability of the state, right? So it's not just a matter of convenience for our senators. There's a reason why it is the way it is. And I think especially now where there is, some folks might say we're going through a populist moment right now. Maybe it's not a good time to just say every senator run again. So just like to, remind everybody there's a reason why our 2 chambers work the way they do. It's not a matter of avoiding the inconvenience of running again. There's an actual reason for it.
In other news, I need to be gone by 6 o'clock tonight because I'm teaching my political science class on that topic. Political Science 1000, Community College. All right. Any other statements before we kick it off? So it is
Just
now
one more thing.
9:30. Yep.
Yeah,
Senator Case, go ahead.
I'm sorry. There are ways to handle the Senate situation. There are ways to allow for exceptions for people to fill out their terms. For example, if you have 2 years left in your term, and things get moved around, you kind of serve out the 2 years for that area. And then you'd have to stand for election in the new area. It might even, if you want to think outside the box, I mean, we now have commissioners that can, or county officials that are actually outside their districts or outside a district. So you could actually allow for 2 years that senator to serve. I mean, we'd have to all agree to it. Well, it takes me 20 minutes to get there. So, I mean, this is possible to have transitional things and then get on the new track in 2 years. I think Josh might have some influence on this.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Anderson.
and yeah, sorry for the confusion there. And yeah, I was trying to, and maybe didn't do a good job of saying that, but that was that Attorney General opinion kind of said, and I tried to say that, said you could do it either way. You could allow for a holdover of senators, or you could require them all to run. So the legislature has a pretty good ability to handle this any way they see fit. It gets complicated, Mr. Chairman, and if you start adding districts or taking districts away, but there is wide latitude. We believe with the legislature to do this.
So committee, I think what I'm going to propose is let's take a 15-minute break. I know there'll be some conversations going on maybe a direction forward today. We'll talk more on just what some possibilities are. And I know some conversations, because you are all texting back and forth and looking at each other with interesting looks, that maybe it's just best we take 15 minutes, take a walk, get some coffee, talk amongst ourselves, and then we'll see at 9:45 what the direction forward might look like. Does that work? 15-minute recess. Bringing it back, it's usually Representative Blackburn. Yep. All right, are we back live again, Ms. Talbot? Great. Committee, welcome back after the break. Hope we all had some exercise and some conversations. So we're at the point, we have another, I don't know, 45 minutes on this topic if we want to continue to proceed on it. There are, again, 3 options before us, and then a 4th option that Representative Yin discussed regarding Northeast Wyoming, and then certainly the 5th, more conceptual option Senator Boner discussed regarding, I'll just call it the Albany County transfer, or all places. So I don't know if anybody had any enlightening discussions over the break or thoughts they wanted to share on how we move forward. Certainly am happy to push, my will, but I would be better served by anyone else, making a motion or offering a direction forward at this time. Senator Scott.
My thought, and at this point, it is strictly my thought, is that what we ought to do is pick at least the 3 variations we have here. Get somebody charged on each one of them with cleaning up the minor discrepancies. Where, somebody's over by or under by less than 100 people. That we have several of those, and the issue of how do you handle the Rock River area, which is slightly more than that, because I think we're very close on that. And get a Senate plan that corresponds to each one of them, because that does seem to be, I think you can't just simply say, we'll do the House and then allocate nested areas, allocate districts to nested areas. I don't think that's going to work. I think you need to see an actual plan. And come back in, somebody mentioned the 15th of December, close enough, a week or 2 to get it done, week, 10 days to get it done, and then avoid the holidays. That would be my suggestion at this point. That I think we're very close to having, but we don't have any of the plans that are quite to the point where we could vote on them at this point. And we don't have the Senate plan to go with them.
Okay. Other thoughts, discussion? Representative Ayer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we need to have a blueprint going forward. And if we look at the plans that are before us right now, the one with the least number of districts out of deviation is the first plan that we're looking at. I voted against it yesterday after sleeping on it, considering all the options. I think we got to have a plan going forward that we can start as our base plan and we can amend it. It's not perfect by any means. There are a lot of things that need to be fixed. We got to have a blueprint that we can amend from. So I'd like to make a motion and we go forward with plan number 1. It's the Zwanitzer plan, lack of a better term. First one that we've been considering, and move forward with that.
Okay, so the motion would be to, I guess, put on the table plan 1. I don't want to call it the Zwanitzer plan. Seconded by Nethercutt, and then we'll have some. We might have public comment. Let me think about that. Senator Boner, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, just to point out, so I think it's important to remember that we already did vote on a plan that, my understand, is already 2A. That's the, the Scott plan, as it's been called. So this as a motion to sort of change gears, change horses here, to be clear. with the what is now the Swanser plan. And so once again, like I said yesterday, push back on that false narrative that we don't have a plan. We do. We have been working on a plan for months. That's basically 2A here as it's labeled here. And I just think that's a much better template to move forward. Yes, it's not perfect, but that's why we're going to keep on working on it. Certainly, whichever way we choose, we're going to have the same discussions, I think. But I think for continuity's sake, especially this very complex process, emotionally charged process, I just think that changing forces halfway is a mistake. So on and against the motion.
All right. Representative Yin and I know Representative Greer, you might be new horses in the barn here, so we'll see where we are. Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I support this conceptually to get us started, but I'm hoping we could do some friendly modification a little bit. So the one friendly modification is to have northeastern Wyoming.
I just want to make sure, are you amending?
I'm asking for a friendly.
Okay.
So I just say, if we could do your motion, talk to you and your second, and kind of expand a little bit to allow more flexibility in northeast Wyoming for those folks to get together and have another bite at the apple. So Niobrara, Weston, Converse, Campbell, and Crook get together. And I'm thinking that the one that makes probably the most sense is what Senator Boner brought yesterday, kind of along those lines. There was also some suggestions made a little while ago that following with that, I believe it was Representative Yin that brought that. So I think that's positive. Also, I think we should, I hope that somebody would be favorable to asking Fremont County to fix the congruity issue, but let them fix it themselves. And really, I'm going to stay out of it too. It's folks in Riverton that need to fix that, but it needs to be fixed with those island areas. If all the rest of the state is coming into deviation, that would be the goal. We'd be in deviation. We have to tackle the basin as well. And I would propose that we look at accommodating the basin lack of people with a combination, which includes the Yellowstone Park missing piece. That's about 100 people, we understand. Also, I think basically the goal for the basin would be to get them just below the minimums and realize we're kicking it down a little bit, but at least we'd be below the minimums. So below -5 or above -5, if you want, it's a negative sign. And so I think Fremont County probably has a role in to do that. They'll kill me when I get back there, but I think Natrona County has a role to do that too. And with that combination and possibly even Northeast Sheridan County or Northwest Sheridan County, possibly. So we throw that into the mix and we send it back out to the folks to figure these things out. The Northeast, the basin, and we also then tackle the Senate districts.
So that's 4 friendly requests.
It is. Is
Motion.
it friendly?
Let me check to kind of see if that can be in this mover's mind friendly incorporated into the motion or not at this time. I want to kind of get his sense of those thoughts on the motion.
Well, I guess my thought was that we would use this as a base plan and then would be glad to accept amendments to this proposal. But if you want to include that all in the motion, that I'm fine with that too. Either way, it doesn't matter to me, but I do think there are some of those problems that need to be fixed. We need to fix the basin. We need to iron out a compromise in the northeast area.
Second, is that?
So whether that's part of the motion or done by amendment is indifferent. I'm indifferent.
I
to
mean, as a
that.
chairman, I think it'd be a lot better to kind of have the statewide plan. And then I actually like, I think every one of those amendments, but I would rather them be amendments in a very conceptual, if that's okay, Senator Case, but let me check with a
Sure.
second. Is that okay, second and mover? If we just move the amendment you brought, and then if that passes, not sure if it will, but if it does, then I do believe there are probably 4 or 5 other motions to kind of change up that map if that passes. So Senator Scott, and then we'll go to Senator Boner.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I was going to essentially speak in favor of what Senator Case wants to do, recognizing that fixing the basin will involve coming into my Senate district. And I don't like it, but I know it and accept it as one of the things that we may have to do to get something done. I think if we can solve all the other problems, that what we might do is use the fixed basin plan in deviation as a backup to, if a court finds that what we've done doesn't meet a constitutional muster. That makes some sense to me. I do think that we need to proceed on that basis for both the Senate 1 compilation and the comparable one on the that doesn't have the Laramie County change to it. I think we need to look at them both, because I think that if we just look at the one, it simply isn't going to work in the Senate.
Okay. So probably for process reasons, let's go with the current motion. And then if there's another motion to have both plans, out there at the same time for counties to work on one or the other on how those would work, I think that would be the appropriate motion to take second. Follow up?
You're wanting to pass, we're going to do one plan and then talk about doing a possibility of a second? Or
I believe so. The motion that Representative Ayer made, correct me if I'm wrong, was for Plan 1 right now to move forward and amend off of. And I certainly believe if that doesn't pass, we'll talk about Plan 2. If that does pass, we can still talk about Plan 2 and see if there's agreement from the committee to have 2 plans out there. If that, staying on the current motion, I understand what you're saying. I just want to make sure we're on the current motion. Senator Boner and then Representative Clausen.
Just a question about this plan, because I probably need a refresher. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. As it relates to the east side of the state, it looks like there's 11 representatives between in Laramie County, which apparently also about 2,000 people from Goshen County that gets put in with Laramie County. Is that correct? And a follow-up to that would be, what would happen if we just kind of kept those 11 representatives completely within Laramie County?
So moving to me, I think right now it's 2,400 on this map of Goshen County residents in with Laramie County. And as you saw on the plan, it's just a little bit under deviation in House District 10 because I was trying to give Goshen all they could. That being said, if this plan does move forward, I don't want to speak for anybody else but myself, but it would be amenable to alterations and amendments of this plan because I'm well aware of the sentiments of certain counties north of Laramie County on their thoughts. And I agree. I wouldn't say I agree with them necessarily, but I'm open to certain amendments. But to answer your question, it's about 2,400 last time I looked, Goshen County residents on this plan in with House District 10.
Okay, and thank you, Mr. Sherman. I agree with what Senator Case said. We just need some flexibility. And that's why I've been so resistant to any incursions into Region 7, because we have a serious problem still in Region 6. And so just where I'm at, I'm probably still not going to vote for this, but as far as amendments go, I think it is important to not, and I'll bring a motion maybe whenever that's appropriate, to just say, not make a decision one way or another as a committee as to what lines are being drawn in Region 6 or Region 7, but just give general direction to both those regions to, 1, remain whole. So that means all of Goshen County has to stay within Region 7, and 2, to go back and start over. That we really do need that flexibility. So, and like I said, if there's 11 reps in Laramie County, that's and if it comes from the southwest part of the state, that's between the counties along I-80.
So we're going to go to Representative Clausen, then to Representative Greer online.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for process's sake and thoughtfulness here, I think we would have less amendments in probably the 2 plan than when we would in the 1 plan, because the amendments that need to go into the 2 plan are already into the 1 plan are already in the 2 plan.
All right, Representative Greer, you're up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question to the chair. Was Senator Case's 4 amendments adopted, or were they just suggestions? I don't disagree with him. I just need to know where I'm at.
They are currently suggestions, Representative Greer, that I asked him to make as amendments should this plan or the other plan or both plans go forward. But right now, it's just as you see on the website that was sent to you as well, compilation 1. And then I do believe, at least as a chairman, I'm going to entertain several amendments and motions for amendments of that plan in line with what Senator Case has asked for. But the motion before you is just on starting work on compilation 1 to be amended.
Okay, so then, Mr. Chairman, I agree with Representative Ayer that we've got to have a framework to work from and something in front of us. I also heard what Senator Scott said and agree with him in terms of, can we get this to as this roadmap right now and then come back and God forbid another meeting, but another meeting in a couple of weeks with some of these issues hashed out. For example, going back to Senator Case's comments about the basin is, yes, I think we could work on some numbers coming with all of Yellowstone. And yes, to the degree that it makes sense out of Fremont County, work on some of those numbers. The coming out of Sheridan County is very, very problematic. But it's going to take a little bit more time. And so going back to, again, the basic motion is, can we get this put out there for a point of discussion and for some wrangling in some of these key areas? I'm talking about my area, obviously, but the other areas that are important. With that in mind, I would support getting something, at least as a roadmap going forward.
Okay. Okay, Representative McGuire, and then Representative Duncan, if your hand goes back up, I'll call on you, but it went down. So Representative McGuire, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to confirm that the motion that we're voting on will take us down to 1 map.
So it will put 1 map on the table, and then I believe from what I'm hearing, there might be a motion to have the second map concurrently go with the first map out to the counties. But the motion at hand is for map 1 to be put on the table, to be sent out for discussion by this committee in the state. And then there may be a subsequent motion on putting 2 maps out. Senator Northcott.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Kind of to follow up from my comments yesterday to today, I am not clear as to the hesitation for us, and I'm obviously interpreting this differently, of where everyone is desiring something to get their arms around that we can start working and digging in. I'm in fully support of moving this bill draft forward, this map, fully contemplating that there will be significant amendments up and until the last day in the budget session, right? I'm also in full support of another map for us to look and compare at. So if there is another motion to support a different map and for this committee to work 2 maps, I think we can manage that. And I think it might be beneficial to see how those different maps could be likely incorporated into one final map for this committee to consider. So, but right now, I mean, it's really hard for us to work these, and we're fighting over, I think, concepts that aren't being asked to be voted on in this moment. So right now, we just need to get something to work. Otherwise, we're going to keep spinning. So I don't think that there's any harm in voting aye. I don't think that you're committing to a position. Let's get it done and stop spinning.
Okay, Representative Duncan, then we'll go to Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to, actually, Senator Boner pretty much answered some of my concerns with his question to you, but just actually, after hearing Senator Nethercott, I'm prepared to move forward with 2 different versions. That way we can have 2 options for 2 different solutions for Northeast, that maybe we can get some better compromise in some of these more difficult areas if we have 2 different maps. But I just want to make sure that my area, because it's so adamant, I want to make sure that my area has that flexibility, that in either way that we can do some amendments, and that was already alleviated by previous comments. So I would support 2 maps.
Senator Northcott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And this is a little bit for humor. Goshen County legislators, we are aware that you do not want to be part of Laramie County. You have all done your jobs in Goshen County. You should be proud of your Goshen County legislators. They are holding true to that position, and we have heard you loud and clear, and we will take that into consideration. So again, voting on version 1 does not mean that Goshen County will be combined with Laramie County. It's just a starting place for us to continue those conversations. Let's put that in bold.
Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Nethercott just said exactly what I'd like to say, but it seems like if we do pass Plan 1 here, that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it, I mean, I think we could solve all the problems that we've talked about by amending that, and we would have a framework as represented, and we would be moving forward. And otherwise, I think we are spinning our wheels. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Boner.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move an amendment then, if that's okay with you. What's that? I like
So
to
you're going
amend,
to
I'd like to
propose a
amend the
friendly
motion.
amendment?
What?
It dep-
We're discussing
We're
the
discuss-
motion on the table. It's okay to have an amendment to the motion, right? Mr. Chairman? I
Agreeable.
mean,
Sure.
okay.
I mean, you certainly can. Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Bring in a motion.
Or maybe it's a friendly amendment, but I thought the direction was that we're gonna have amendments and not, actual amendments, not friendly amendments. So that's what we're doing. So anyways, I move that in this map 1, that we keep region 7 and region 6, or keep region 7 whole. So that basically remove the 2,000 people that are going from Goshen County to Laramie County. And just keep region 7 whole. So that's the first part of the motion. Second part is that we don't take a position on any of the lines on region 6 or region 7. That'd just be a blank slate, and we go back and further discuss with those 2 regions. So that's the motion. Like I said, it's, if I get a second, I'll explain it, but we do need the flexibility. And with Laramie County having 11 legislators, which I'm okay with, that gives us the flexibility we need, but it needs to be done, based off the conversations of the region 6, region 7, and probably not coming from we just have to have flexibility. We can't have any incursions into the region. So that's the motion, and that's the reason for it. And it's just, we really do need that flexibility.
I'm going to let the record reflect that Representative Duncan from Goshen County seconded that. But you have multiple people who would like to second that. And so let me make sure I understand the motion. It's on compilation 1, but you want to edit compilation 1 to do the submitted plans from the 4 House, 2 Senate, and the 4 county clerks for region 6, and still leave the northeast part of the state as drawn by who, or just leave it open?
Just leave it open. No, just leave region 6, region 7 open, because that's what we're going to do anyways. No matter what happens here, we're going to go back and we're going to rehash basically the whole east part of the state, except for Laramie and Albany County. So that's what's happening, no matter what. And I just like to, if I'm going to be able to support this, like I said, I have no problem with Laramie County having 11 representatives, so long as we keep region 7 whole. That's the problem I have with this plan right now. That's why the amendment fixes that.
Senator Case.
I just have a procedural question.
Yep.
I'm wondering if it's, the motion is divisible or not. And the
Yes.
divisibility would be on the no DNA exchange between Goshen and Laramie County.
But we're going to.
Well, but then that's one question, but the other question is to allow flexibility for the region. So is that divisible or not in your mind? And
It's divisible. We could go with the first
then I would move
concept.
to devise it. I'd
All
ask
right.
it to be devised.
So which part of the division you want to tackle first? Okay,
The
go
question
ahead.
of whether Goshen County is going to be in.
The DNA question.
Yes. We can keep on talking about it if you want, but I might call it for the question.
So I think that's just too limiting in a way. It's, you know, so that that's kind of like saying the same thing with the basin. You're only going to go to this direction or whatever, you know. I don't know. I like the idea of giving flexibility for those regions to get together. I just hard stop on whether you're going to exchange between Laramie and Goshen County, I think is inappropriate.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think that we may get a different viewpoint from the bringer of the amendment. Currently, I don't hear a time frame for this amendment. So does that mean that all the way through the session, we can't touch these two and make changes? I would just, well, I'll be against the amendment simply because I think what we should be thinking about right now is just adopting a map. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Boner.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, yeah, to answer Representative McGuire's question, to address Senator Case's concern, no, this doesn't preclude the two counties working together. It's just the starting point. And frankly, you know, like I said, we need some flexibility to deal with the challenges we have in the northeast part of the state. We take population out of Region 7, that makes it harder to do. In fact, you know, the reason why I'm able to support Laramie County getting 11 representatives is we may very well have to do the opposite, right? Which is to take, you know, 11 or 12 or 1 to 12, 2,000 people out of Goshen County or Platte County or somewhere and put them into Laramie County. You know, we might need that flexibility as we deal with the challenges in the northeast part of the state. So it's not something you know, I just want to keep the options open. But for now, I think you're limiting our ability in the eastern part of the state to come to an agreement when you're taking population out of Region 7. That's the reason for it. It's not a, you know, it's not a hard and fast no. It's just recognizing we do have a challenging situation and we need flexibility to deal with it.
Okay, so the current motion is divided, and I just want to make sure I understand, it's giving Laramie County 11 reps within Laramie County and then letting what are now Region 6 and 7 work together to figure out a plan that works for those 7 counties. Representative, make sure I have that correct. Okay, Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, so then I think I'm interested in hearing from the Laramie County representatives and senators on what their opinion is on using a fully 11 district Laramie County as a starting point, instead of 10.5.
Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman, again, I'm confused by this process. We are going to amend this until the 11th hour, right? And so right now, we're just trying to get a starting place. So I'm willing to vote aye to get a starting place on anything. But I think it's reasonable. I'm prepared to call question on Boner's amendment and vote just so we can get going, right? So again, for the members of the public, what happens here today is not even near the end. We're going to be having another meeting, and there will be probably another meeting again, and then we'll go into a full session where there will be multiple corporations committee meetings in the session and then again on the floor. So I don't know if we think that we're going to, you know, it's going to be concrete today. We want it to be over, but it's not going to be. And so, you know, I think that's just the strategy that we should take is let's get started with something we really understand how we're amending and can feel those consequences more thoughtfully.
Mr. Chairman.
Let's go to Representative Blackburn.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, so you're not wanting to have any amendments on this map until we've got the map, and then as we work it through the next few weeks. Is that what you're saying? No amendments today?
Mr. Chairman, no, I support the amendments. I'm going to vote aye for Senator Boner's amendment. And I think the closer it is to consensus from the committee, the better. But I want to make sure we're not trying to get too much in the minutia at this point, recognizing that there's a lot. Now that we've narrowed down where I think the primary concerns within the state are Campbell County, the Laramie Goshen County relationship. and then the Bighorn Basin, we can really just start focusing in on those pieces, I think, more strategically and have greater conversations about those when there is a solid board to work from, right? And so whatever it takes to get us there, to have a map that we have agreed upon, or even two maps that we have agreed upon, I'm prepared to do that.
Okay. Question being called. I guess we can raise your hands online and we'll just raise our hands. All those in favor of of the amendment from Senator Boner onto the compilation one, please raise your hand. For the first division. 4, 5, 6, 7, Shelley, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that division passes. Second division, Representative Boner, or Senator Boner, my apologies.
Not to vote me already,
Right.
depending on who you are. But yeah, just once again, the second division is just to recognize that, once again, these lines are going to be very controversial in the northeast part of the state. I think it'd be best if the committee basically doesn't take a position in that disagreement today and just give us a chance to go back and figure something out the best we can. I think we're getting close, frankly, but I don't think it's prudent for the committee to pick a side today.
Any other comments on that division of the motion? Senator, another cut.
I have a quick comment,
Yeah.
but since you're ready to vote and vote aye, I support that, but I do think that history has taught us that there has been no consensus, and therefore they brought this problem to us today. The likelihood of that being resolved is probably minor. And I would suggest a plan that is the least likely to result in litigation, or the least deviations is probably the best course and the safest course for us to take. So I would be comfortable with taking that course that has the least deviation to it.
You want to amend it to say it has to be with a deviation, whatever they submit?
I think that's appropriate for us to do.
That'd be a friendly amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Is that friendly? Okay, so
we-
again,
And I would like to make that
Senator Case.
amendment to the overall plan so that it applies to everywhere in the state, but not at this time, at the appropriate time.
all right, so what we're voting on is allowing that 7-county region to come back together, work as a larger region outside of Laramie County, which I think you've benefited our county more than we could ask for, possibly out of spite.
Yeah.
But for those 7 counties to work together on coming up with 10 House members, and the plan has to be within deviation. That's the motion. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 8, 9, 10. That motion also passes. All right, so now we're back on the main motion, as far as I understand it, of Senator Scott.
Inquiry on the nature of the motion. Is the intent of the motion that this be the exclusive plan?
So technically, Representative Ayer, it was your motion. Your thoughts on this being the exclusive plan going forward now? My thought was, just so you know, that we were probably likely to have another motion, but if we settled the disputes on where we're going, maybe we don't need 2 plans out there, but as a maker of the motion, your thoughts?
Well, I had no idea on what anyone might do in subsequent motion. We can vote for another map. That's certainly an option that's open. My motion was to go forward with this plan as a blueprint going forward. And if we amend it, I anticipate amendments. I want amendments. I think, we've got problems in the Bighorn Basin. We got problems in Ocean Crook County area. But we need to start from some base plan, and that's what my motion was.
That is an exclusive on the motion, yeah. But I think we've all heard that there may be another motion for Plan 2A, and we can talk about that at that point. So that's the motion on the table. Any further comment or discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion to submit statewide compilation 1 to start working from as a state, please raise your hand.
Is there any amendments allowed before this?
I would kind of like to be on a plan and then amend the plan, so it's not, but yes, okay, we can continue to make them, if we're still on, let's continue to make amendments on, right now we're on statewide plan compilation 1. Senator Case, as currently amended twice.
Senator Nethercutt.
Senator Nethercutt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move for the elimination of the island areas within Fremont County. I do think that's inconsistent with how the map works. And I think that's too difficult for senators and representatives in that area to have island pockets. And that it needs to be contiguous throughout for districts, and that it's consistent that way.
But you're not directing us how to do it.
No. That is a motion. Yeah, I moved. Yeah.
Seconded by Boner. So the motion is for right now Fremont County to redraw their lines in a way that makes sense without the non-contiguous island, arguably on balance, I think was a word I heard 4 times yesterday. But for Fremont County has to not have the current makeup of islands in the middle west of Irvington. Okay, discussion.
Just to be careful with the vernacular, there are no islands in the current existing situation. It's the current proposed plan.
The plan that was proposed. Question, all those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed?
I'm opposed to that.
Okay, that plan passes. More motions. Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman. I would like, when we get done with this plan, that it be within deviation across the state, ±5. And so the only elephant in the room is still the basin. And if we just say, let's require everybody to be in deviation, that'll force my county, so some parts of Teton County, and some parts of Natrona County to come together to help get a plan for the basin that would be within deviation. So I just say, let's reaffirm our principles to bring this plan into deviation, and areas that are out need to work correspondingly to get it in deviation.
There's second on that motion. Second, and then Senator Scott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to support this motion. I think it's the sound way to proceed. I think when we look at what we would have to do to get in deviation, given the situation in the basin, we will use the in deviation plan as a backup that would be adopted if we lose a court decision over that particular issue. And I think we would be at some risk of losing a court decision over that. So I think it ought to be done with the intent of being dead serious about it. This is what we would do if we had to stay within deviation. And then we can look at it and say that just disenfranchises too many people, and go back to a milder version that doesn't disenfranchise them.
Representative Greer, and then I'll go to Representative McGuire.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I mean, I'm gonna obviously oppose the motion. I think there are some things we can do, but short of picking up 600 to 700 votes in Fremont County, you're not going to get to -5, plain and simple. And you know, it's been clearly expressed to me by the folks from Fremont County that is not palatable to them, and it does disenfranchise them. And you know, we just voted to eliminate what were dubbed islands in the current plan. But what is the difference between, you know, a half a mile of roadway and 70 miles of mountains to get to Natrona County without a paved road? Yeah, it may touch. So I think we continue to work on the problem, but I'm reluctant. You know, I want us to have a plan to move forward, but I'm reluctant to box us in. We've been through the research, and we know there are reasons that we can deviate. You know, to do this, to force people to do something that disenfranchises voters in the areas that surround the Bighorn Basin doesn't make sense to me. And, you know, this motion passes, and I end up having a difficult time pushing forward. I would rather do it the opposite way from what Senator Scott said. Put the plan together with the deviation in the basin, minimize to the greatest extent possible, work on the upper end on the other districts, and then show what happens if you have to go to a 5% deviant or deviation, and the effect that that has on voters and the disenfranchisement of those people. And explain that, hey, we tried to do this and it doesn't work and the deviation's justified.
So Representative McGuire, if he still has a comment, I'm going to Senator Scott. Go ahead, Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my question would be mechanically, so hypothetically, if we went through and we passed with a 6% deviation in the basin and it was challenged, mechanically, how does that work? Is there an immediate stay by a court and we have to come back in the next Saturday and they don't give us any food until we come up with a and I say that because back in the in common law, when a jury did go out, they wouldn't give them any food. That's how they made sure they got a verdict timely. Or is this like a 2-year process? I just am curious mechanically what would happen if there was a deviation and it was challenged. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So Mr. Anderson, I'm sure you're aware, you're up. Maybe just give the quick cursory overview of what could likely happen, where it would come from, what the defense ability would be, and how quickly it would proceed.
Mr. Chairman, I think tons of variables in there as to how that might proceed, who would challenge it, what the result in the court would be, what the remedy ordered by the court would be. In the memo, they indicated that, the court may draw the map themselves rather than sending it back to the legislature. In the Gorin case, they mentioned that. So there's all kinds of variables as if when you get into litigation, Mr. Chairman. I don't know how much we can forecast that.
But Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, the outcomes are way out there. I mean, they could prevail on the plan. It could be sent back to the legislature to do it again. It could be, it could end up in a purview of the court to draw the plan, to tweak it. It could go a lot of different directions. And you could get that the plan is ordered not to go into effect. Who knows which way they would go.
But timeline, from what I understand, it would be a lawsuit and expedited because, we have to file for office in May. Would that be a correct sentiment?
Likely, Mr. Chairman. Again, it would depend, who brought the case, how the court decided to handle it. They could certainly, like Senator Case said, put a stay into effect and not let it go into effect. It could be challenged. Some of these litigations, and I think in Kentucky went on pretty much for the last 8 or 10 years. Yeah. So, like I said, there's no real way. I don't think that we could forecast exactly how it would play out, Mr. Chairman.
And Senator Scott?
And I think I agree with that last sentiment. Frankly, I think it's a different way of getting where I think we need to go, which is to have a genuine, this is what we would do if we had to get in deviation, get the basin within deviation, and then a provision that we aren't going to do that unless we're ordered to. I think that's the best way to handle it. This is a slightly different way of getting at where Representative Greer wants to go. But I think it's the one that gives us the best chance in court because it leads to the adoption of a backup plan that is what we really would do. And I recognize that you can't do it just in Fremont County, I don't think. I think it will come into Natrona County. I think it might come into Sheridan County as well, in spite of the mountain range, and possibly into some more of northern Teton County. So you have risks with with saying this is what we really would do, and we would mean we'd have to find out dead serious what we really would do, Mr. Chairman. And that's, I think, is desirable in terms of strengthening our position and having a better chance of dealing with the basin intelligently.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I offer a friendly amendment to the amendment on the table, or the motion on the table, of the deviation throughout the entire state, but flexibility within the basin?
You can offer the friendly amendment. State it for me one more time, your intent.
Basically, it's the same motion of the deviation across the state, but changing the part about the basin just to give the basin flexibility.
But Mr. Chairman, I'm the maker of the motion, and that's counter to what I'm trying to achieve. So it would not be friendly to me. I mean, vote it up or vote it down. If my motion were to fail, in effect, you would get what you want. And you could more
fair.
carefully present the congruent motion that's the opposite, and that would be okay. But I would not accept that as friendly.
So committee, just to share my thoughts. I've seen one plan from the Greater Basin area, and I believe it's from the clerks and has agreement from the legislators, but I haven't seen any competing plans, and I just personally don't feel like our starting place is we can't do it, right? Because when I run the numbers, if it was just Fremont County and the 4 basin counties, you can draw 10 seats. Is that correct, Mr. Swank? You know what deviation might be?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. It supports 10 seats at a minus 3.6 deviation.
So fully understanding that we have House District 33.
Right.
And is a minority majority district, which causes
Majority
concern.
minority district.
Majority minority, that we may need to go into Natrona or Teton or another. I guess I would ask that we do our best attempt at what could be possible. And then we can certainly bounce it and just say that really isn't workable, but I would encourage at least a second look of an attempt that we say it is possible on paper. It might not work for anyone, but I would support Senator Case's motion of trying the hardest we can before we just say, nah, they came to us with a plan that was under deviation, take it or leave it. Let's keep working it. So that would be my encouragement. Other comments? Mr. Swank, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just for educational purposes, in the discussion about potential additions to the basin, Hans Adi can correct me, the remaining population in Yellowstone is about 80 people. And the closest voting precinct in Natrona County has 116 people. So that only adds about 200 people to that. So there would still be potential for about 500 required from Riverton, or not Riverton, Fremont County.
Mr. Chairman?
I heard it. Representative Greer, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't, but you know, we didn't give our plan to you and say, take it or leave it. But if you recall, our first plan was to stay within deviation. That was our first decision as the legislators and the clerks. We had the meetings, we heard from Fremont County, which is where it made sense. We listened to those folks, Senator Case in particular, and then went back to our plan B. And that was after consultation with the House Corporations Committee. So I just want to make it clear, we didn't just say, take this or leave this. We put forward our best effort, which, keep in mind, within all the communities within the basin is not very palatable for all the reasons that we hear from Laramie County and Goshen County and Weston County and Campbell County. We have all those issues. But we put those aside to give you what we felt was the best option. So it was not a take it or leave it proposition. We gave you our best effort.
I do appreciate that, Chairman Greer, and you are correct. There were discussions, and we have batted it around on what would be achievable and work for all of us and what the deviation might look like. So I do remember those conversations. But ultimately, there was only one submitted plan from the basin after consultation. And Mr. Odie, while you're here, can I pull you up real fast? Maybe you could just walk through some conversations if there were other I shouldn't say preferred plans, but are there alternatives out there? Or if this motion were to pass, where do you see might be the most likely place to work with a neighboring county? Or any outstanding issues you have that aren't resolved right now in the current submission?
So Mr. Chairman, thank you. Hans Odie, Deputy Park County Clerk. The best, our best situation probably is the Valley Plan to come out of Fremont County. I know that does have issues with House District 34. We also, I've also looked at what it would look like to go over the mountain and take Ranchester area. It makes 26 a really funny looking area because they would have to go, obviously in the wintertime, they'd have to go down to Grable and then up over the mountain. It puts population honestly in the wrong area of the basin. Where the basin needs population is in the south, because Worland or Washakie and Hot Springs County have so few, and all of the population really is concentrated in the north. And so putting the Ranchester area over into 26 just more concentrates that population up in the north side. Again, the Natrona idea, looking at my map here, looks like you'd have to go almost all the way to Casper to gather up enough people. And what my idea would be to increase 27 from the south part there of 27 through the No Water area down into Natrona. Taking the park is, again, 79 people. It's just not enough to really help us out. And again, puts population in the northern part of the state or northern part of the basin. If the basin dropped to 5 legislators, I've looked at this too, you would have to take 3,000 people out of the Bighorn Basin and push them into Fremont County, which again messes with your majority minority population there and how they spread that out. What that would look like is taking everything south of Owl Creek with the remaining part of the reservation that's in Hot Springs County and through Thermopolis on Broadway. The only stoplight in Thermopolis is where that's Broadway and 6th Street. You come right down Broadway from Meeteetse and through East Thermopolis and then up Highway 20 to the Washakie County line. Everything east of there would be 3,000 people. So it essentially would leave Hot Springs County with about 1,600 people in that orphan population. And then those 3,000 would have to go down into Fremont County somewhere.
Okay, Senator Scott.
To disagree with the witness, but I was doing some calculations last night based on using an ideal district size in the basin for House members. And my calculation was that the Hot Springs County district would essentially wind up, it would go out of the Bighorn Basin, would wind up with enough population to be 56% of the ideal representative population. So that would be in the vicinity of 5,000 people. And that means that you could do it with less people, but you go over the ideal in the northern part of the basin if you do it. And I think that would be unwise. So you wind up with a district that's still a Bighorn Basin district, but it has a heavy component of either Natrona or Fremont or both. And so I don't think you're just sending a 3,000 out. I think it's more like 5 and slightly a majority of a House district.
It's true. Roscoe, question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question and a thought. The question might be for Josh. Since it seems like there's hardly anyone in Wyoming that would be opposed to the basin, maybe not being able to make the deviation. Who historically has brought these lawsuits against states? Is it generally within the state that these lawsuits are being brought? That's just a question. And then the thought is that we are getting quite a bit away from Representative Ayer's motion. So I think we should get back to that if we could. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Anderson, if you know off the top of your head, us or other states.
Mr. Chairman, I think the court case would have to be brought by, a voter in the state, someone who's affected by the plan. Could certainly be backed by outside groups. That has happened in other states. I don't know so much in this state. But likely, if the basin was on the low end of the deviation, it could potentially be brought by someone in a district that's towards the high end of the deviation.
Senator Scott.
To elaborate on that, you have a wide range of possible plaintiffs that if you mess up the majority minority district in Fremont County, probably your tribal councils are potential plaintiffs. Anybody who's aggrieved a citizen in Natrona County who thinks that we should have had more representation potentially could bring it. Same with how it plays out in Laramie County or Campbell County. Any of them potentially could. The lesson from the Brown v. Thompson case that went to the Supreme Court is if you're mad about some part of a plan, it's not safe to just attack the plan in court on that. They'll say that isn't big enough to make a difference. And that's what they did in Brown. So you attack the whole plan. Plus, I asked earlier, Josh, and you can confirm this if you will, is attorney fees mandatory? The answer was that they were not mandatory, but were frequently given in that. So you do have the possibility of a suit essentially by a lawyer finds a plaintiff who's essentially freelancing for legal fees. So you get all those possibilities of litigation. And I think reapportionment has seen them all.
Make sure no one else has questions, Mr. Odie, while I have them. Okay, thanks for hanging out with us and answering my questions. Representative Yen.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So I'm going to vote against this motion. I think I did fight for in deviation when we had our little informal meeting. However, I think what this currently does is muddies Representative Ayer's motion a little too much. I think I would be interested in seeing what an in deviation and what a minimal deviation plan would look like. And maybe I'll make a motion to that effect after this motion is disposed of. But I think right now, this motion inside of Representative Ayer's motion is too much. So I'm going to vote this one down. And I hope we can keep the map clean without trying to muddy it up with requirements for every region.
Okay, any other comments? All those in favor of the motion to, I guess the motion center case is to have the state be completely within deviation in all districts. Okay, all those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
Let's do a show of hands then, especially for the people online. My apologies. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4. All those opposed to the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That motion has failed. We are back on the original air motion on compilation 1. Senator Case or Senator Scott,
I've asked the question once already.
any other further comment? Question on the motion to put forward at least statewide plan compilation 1 with the previous 3 amendments placed on it. All in favor of that amendment, please raise your hand. It's compilation 1. The motion, did I say all in favor of the motion as amended 3 times that originally was made by Representative Ayer and seconded by Senator Nethercott to put forward statewide plan compilation 1, please raise your hand. As amended. I have 12 ayes. Senator Scott.
That we put forward a plan based on the, I think it's 2A here, with the corrections made to get it within deviation, less the Bighorn Basin. And to also accept the motion that we had from Mr. Boner, Senator Boner on the previous plan.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Grill.
I sincerely apologize. I have got a hard stop at 11 and I will come back and join the committee as soon as I can. I apologize to everybody, but that's why, yeah.
Okay. See you soon, Representative Grill. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Boner. And so Senator Scott, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you restate it kind of exactly what you're looking for one more
Mr.
time?
Chairman, what I want to do is to have a plan before us based on its compilation 2A with the out of deviations corrected and with the flexibility for that Representative Boner's motion gave to the eastern part of the state, District 6 and 7, that was agreed to previously. And Mr. Chairman, since I've got a second, let me say why. Frankly, I think we need to look at both plans because I think having the single plan isn't going to work for the Senate. It just isn't going to work, I don't think. I want to see how it'll work, but I think it won't. So I want to see both of them available.
All right, so I'm just a little unclear. Maybe LSO can help me out. What remains in compilation 2 that we didn't amend in the compilation 1 in 2A? Is that the seat being in the west instead of the east is the only, because if we're including the other intricacies on the east part, but not with Laramie County, LSO jump me in on that.
Mr. Chairman, map 2A, I believe the 2 biggest differences are the first item that you mentioned, the district change between the western part of the state and Laramie County. And then in this option, currently, it would be Region 6 is out of deviation, but with the amendment from Senator Boner, that would give them the flexibility to alleviate that concern.
Mr. Chairman.
Scott.
We may also have to make a modification with regard to District 47. And I can work that out with the LSO, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. And Senator Scott is correct. There are currently, I believe, 3 districts in the Region 9 or Sweetwater Carbon area that are below deviation. So that would again be addressed by his amendment to have all districts but the basin come back within deviation.
So ultimately, this put Laramie County at 10, where we're still drawing all 10 of our House districts at 4.9 and allowing the 12 House districts in the south and the west to all draw roughly 4.5% below. It just makes someone correct me on that if I'm wrong. I don't think I am. Representative Yen?
Sorry, was it seconded before I continue discussion?
Second.
Oh, yeah, okay, so I think I would need to understand what the possibilities for adjusting Region 10 and 9 that the good senator is saying that he would propose to do on his own before I would vote on this plan.
Senator Scott?
The numbers work out where there is enough population to get everybody in 9 and 10 within deviation. And there's several options for doing it. It would not be particularly difficult to do, I think. The out of deviations are relatively small. And we talked about some of them yesterday. Do you go into Sublette County? Do you go into the Smoot area in Lincoln County? That may be the best option. And there's some other minor adjustments in the Sweetwater County, Carbon County area.
Other thoughts, comments? Senator Boner?
Yeah, on and forward, this one, I think we do need to keep both plans alive. There's still a lot of discussion, I think, that centers around the population shift around the I-80 corridor and how that fits in with the rest of the state. I think we have to have both options on the table. And like I said, I think, I think the more moderate approach is going to be probably somewhere in between these two plans. So I think it's important that we do keep them both alive. And I have a tendency to agree with the senator from Casper. It's tough when you go in and having done this in Region 7. Yeah, you're not going to keep your every last community whole. It's just not going to happen. And so I think the people in southwest part of the state need to understand that. And like the senator from Casper said, you have to, you're very close, and it won't take that much adjustment to keep within those deviations.
So, I mean, just for the record, I think I already said it, but keeping Laramie County to 10 House districts and allowing, all but Lincoln County and Teton that are historically losing population to be drawn at negative 4.6 to 4.9 would not be palatable to my community. So I'll probably be having to vote no on the plan. Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we need to come out of here with one plan that we have with amendments on. We can do all the things that have happened with all the things that have been suggested with amendments to this current plan. But we need to have one plan that we're all working on, and they're going on parallel paths. I think it puts added burden on LSO, it's added burden on all of us. We don't have just one plan that we're working from. Go ahead, I'd resist this motion. Thank you.
Representative Roscoe. You're still muted, Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would have to agree with Representative Ayer that the idea that, and disagree with the senator that if we do, we can make that the region work, but it doesn't really work with the state, and it goes against our community of interest greatly over there. And so I think in looking at the state as a whole and the populations the way they are, that just making one region work unnecessarily, I just couldn't vote for this one. And I do think one plan is better if we're going to move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further comments or discussion from the committee? Seeing none. All in favor of Senator Scott's motion for Plan 2A with amendments, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4. All those opposed, raise your hand. 3, 4, 5, 6. Representative Duncan, you're voting no, just making sure. 7. Okay. That motion has failed. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've got ourselves in an impossible situation. I'm going to make a request to the LSO to provide an amendment that does what the second plan would be, an amendment to the plan we put forward, and to prepare a private bill for introduction in the Senate under my sponsorship doing the same thing.
Certainly appreciate you playing nice with the committee, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman,
I understand
feel that we have been rolled in the process. I think that one county has exercised extraordinary lack of statesmanship in this. I think we have transformed what was a relatively simple reapportionment into something that just isn't going to work for one house of the legislature, and I'm frankly disgusted. You know, this is my fifth one of these things. This was potentially the easiest one, and I think it has been messed up like you wouldn't believe. And that's how I feel, and I feel I'm getting disgusted with the whole process.
Senator Case?
I think his private request is appropriate. We should note it. I don't think we have to vote on it. I'd move we take a 10-minute break.
All right, 10-minute break.
With that woman in the blue jacket.
Hi, Jim. We'll start when you're ready. All right, committee, we're almost right on schedule. And because we didn't officially close out the last topic, I do want to make sure there's no other motions or discussion at this time on redistricting. Seeing none online and sensing we're ready to move on from that. And let's come back in the afternoon to when an appropriate next meeting of the committee will be. It would be my hope to have it before January 1st with a better laid out map just in case. But moving on then, we will get to 22 LSO 56, election organization formation requirements. And I saw Mr. Schoen walked in. And then he walked right out apparently into the hall with someone.
Question on the bill.
Hi, Director Schoen. You ready to come front and center? I thought we might have a little more on redistricting, but I think we're ready to move on. So you're next on our agenda. Which would you like? Mr. Hopkinson actually showed up today, so I guess we'll have him present. When I say he didn't have, he is here for sponsorship of that bill. And so we're pleased to welcome our attorney, Mr. Hopkinson, to walk us through 22 LSO 56. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 22 LSO 56, working draft 11.11.
Yep.
I can move it closer if that helps. This draft comes before the committee with the request initially of the Secretary of State's office from the May meeting. The committee, at my recollections, did vote to ask LSO to draft a bill draft, and that is now here. The bill draft primarily does three things. It provides a definition of organization with respect to Chapter 25, the campaign practices of Wyoming statute within the election code. It provides a requirement that organizations file a statement of formation for the purpose of reporting political expenditures, and it increases the threshold for requiring an itemized statement for independent expenditures and electioneering communications from $500 to $1,000. I'll start on page 4, lines 12 through 17. That just provides that definition of organization. That means any corporation, partnership, trade union, professional association, or civic, fraternal, or religious group, or other profit or nonprofit entity, or any other entity influencing an election, except a candidate's campaign committee, political action committee, or political party. So essentially it covers just about any group except for political action committees, candidate campaign committees, or the political parties themselves. And we'll see that definition throughout the bill. Moving back then to page 2. This amends Wyoming Statute 2225-101 by providing a new subsection C that provides that an organization that receives contributions or expends funds in excess of $1,000 for the purposes of independent expenditures or electioneering communications has to file a statement of formation for the purpose of reporting political expenditures. And that will be filed in the offices as required by 2225-107, which is going to be either the county clerk or the Secretary of State's office, depending on the office that's being under election. Paragraph 1 requires that the statement of formation shall list the name and mailing address of the organization, the name and mailing address, and over on page 3, name and mailing address of the organization chairman and treasurer, if applicable, or the organization's designee, the date the organization formed, and the purpose of the organization. Paragraph 2 On page 3 requires that an organization supporting or opposing an initiative or referendum petition file within 10 days of receiving or expending funds for opposing or supporting that referendum. Paragraph 3 requires that if they make an organization causes or intends to cause an independent or electioneering communication to be made in a primary, general, or special election, they file that statement within 10 days of making the independent expenditure. And if they have not, on page 4, then it requires it be made within 24 hours of making that expenditure or electioneering communication. Moving on to page 5 through 8 are just conforming amendments dealing with that change in the definition, either removing language that doesn't need to be there anymore because of that being provided through the definition, or adding language to make sure that it still applies to the proper parties. And then on page 9, we see a change there, lines 6 and 7, just changing the amount, the threshold amount from $500 to $1,000 for requiring an itemized statement of contribution and expenditures during any primary, special, or general election. And on lines 17 through 18, there's a change there from requiring that statement to be signed either by the chairman or treasurer of an organization to also allowing the organization's designee. On page 10, this amends 2225-107, which is where reports are required to be filed. On line 6, it adds a language or organization. Lines 8 and 9 adds organization that causes an independent expenditure or election communication to be made within the county. And this is just providing for organizations to file with county clerks in those circumstances. The bill section 2 would repeal 2225-101C3B. And that language is there in the staff comment below. Essentially on page 11 there, you see the B, which would be the adoption or defeat of a ballot proposition, removing that from what a part of the definition there for independent expenditure, or what constitutes an independent expenditure. Section 3 provides the act is still
Mr.
effective.
Hopkinson, can I stop you for a second? Senator Case.
What is the connection with that? I'm not following that exactly. Why is B, why do we need to repeal B from being a independent expenditure?
I would frankly, Mr. Chairman, I would defer to the Secretary of State on that. My recollection is they just weren't seeing it as necessary as being something that would actually be applicable, is my recollection, but I again would defer to Mr. Shem.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
The act would be effective July 1st, 2022. And with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Hopkinson? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, it looks to me that the stated purpose of this is to get greater transparency so that we know either independent expenditures or on a ballot initiative, not only the name of the organization and who's put the organization together, but a list of their donors, so that as with campaign finance, other campaign finance reporting, we're seeking to have that public information. Question on that, is that the Supreme Court has on occasion indicated some willingness to try to protect anonymous written statements and that sort of thing. Are we going to run afoul of any Supreme Court decision doing this?
Mr. Hopkinson, if you know.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I did provide the committee with a memo kind of highlighting some of the potential issues. Essentially, I think that is a bit of an open question. There is some 10th Circuit precedent which would suggest that making requirements like this, particularly of organizations that aren't political in nature, they have to meet certain thresholds. However, other states do have similar laws to this that have passed their circuits muster. So I think it is a fair question. Which way it would go, I can't say, although I would lean towards it, particularly given the decisions in Citizens United and the cases that have stemmed from that. It would probably pass constitutional muster, but I can't really give a solid answer on that. It is certainly an issue.
Senator Scott, follow up. Then I'll go to Representative McGuire.
Well, I have another question, but following up on that, Mr. Chairman, that answer, I think it's a good idea to have this transparency. And that answer tells me that there hasn't been a clear court decision against it. So I think we're all right proceeding, and I think we should, because it's the right thing to do.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd be happy to let you take a look at the Green Book before, if you want to check this before you answer. But would the penalty provision for this particular bill, would it be found in 2225-108, which is the penalty provision at the end of this section?
Mr. Hopkinson, or you can go research it if you'd like as well before you answer, but go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would want to go take a closer look to give a more clear answer, but I believe that those penalty provisions to a certain extent are applicable to this as well. But I would be happy to take a look and give you a clear answer on that.
Representative McGuire, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And sometimes I get surprised when I find some things in the criminal side of the statutes. Are you aware of anything currently that's in the criminal statutes that would apply to this particular bill or the chapter?
Mr. Hopkinson.
Mr. Chairman, off the top of my head, I believe the sanctions here would be civil or civil penalties, financial sanctions for failing to file. But I don't recall that there's a specific misdemeanor penalty, but that would be something I would need to.
Thank you.
And I'd be happy to do that.
Senator Scott.
Can Representative McGuire enlighten us as to what that penalty provision he was citing says?
A reading from the Green Book by Representative McGuire.
Yeah, and I have taken advantage of that to put everybody to sleep. It's a fairly long provision, but to shorten it down, it's $500 for a failure to file and $200 for a subsequent failure to file. Now, after that, it will be referred to the local prosecuting attorney's office, which would either be a county attorney or a district attorney. And yes, I believe that it would be a civil penalty at that point.
Further comments from Mr. Hopkinson? Questions to Mr. Hopkinson? Seeing none. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now we should probably call the Secretary of State's office up. Mr. Schoen. Welcome, Director.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Committee is, or maybe I'm a little too.
It's still morning, but
It's still morning. Good
feels
morning.
like afternoon for most of us after this.
Kai Schoen, Election Director in the Secretary of State's office. I appreciate Mr. Hopkinson's review of this bill. And as he said earlier, following I guess it was the May meeting, but took place in June, that Mr. Chairman, you had asked if there was anything, that our office could think of that would be helpful in regards to organizations that would make it clear as to when and what an organization is to disclose under the law. And so this bill can address an organization's interpretation of the existing law when they're to file, but it does provide a bit of a more streamlined process that I think would allow the public and our office really to assist these organizations earlier on in the process. The bill was a collaboration, as Mr. Hopkinson said, with our office and LSO. It creates that requirement for organizations as defined within the bill to form within 10 days of causing or intending to cause these independent expenditures or electioneering communications. And we recognize that organizations, they are uniquely different than a PAC or a candidate committee. They exist for other purposes. And the way that this bill reads, we believe that it takes that uniqueness into account, and it's not egregious or unreasonable. We think it creates a logical flow really for the organizations from formation to filing, which already exists, as we see with political action committees and candidate committees. They have to form within 10 days when they determine they're going to be doing something politically. And so it follows that same type of transparency in that process. The public will really potentially be able to know sooner than later who these organizations are and how to contact them, because there'll be contact information required by those formations. So long as those expenditures, of course, are greater than $1,000. It'll also give organizations the same reporting reminders that everybody on this committee receives, as well as candidate committees in PACs and parties, that there's upcoming filings that are taking place. Because currently, the way organizations operate is we don't know what they're doing, how much they're doing of it, and it's up to them to file. And so there's no mechanism in place to remind them, to assist them with that process. So by getting them formed like other entities, it just puts them in that queue for those reminders and to help them get those reports filed. So it's definitely a process that has a start and a finish, formation to filing. If we're to receive calls in the 2022 election about ads depicting a candidate, whether in a positive or negative fashion, we'll be able to reach out to these organizations, let them know that this ad that was ran, or mailing address, or this particular social media campaign that we've been alerted to, if it's in excess of 1,000, you need to know that you need to form. And it also gives us an opportunity to remind them of the filing periods that will come thereafter. And really with that, I don't have anything more to say about the bill, but I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Questions, Representative McGuire first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I support every portion of this bill. And my question is, so we always have to be sensitive to a group forms. They send out a notice or something like that, a mailer. They don't realize that it doesn't correspond to this current statute. You notify them in some manner. And so they either stop or retract or whatever. That's one situation. The situation that I want to ask you about is the group or organization that intentionally violates it and thinks that, well, $500, that's just a cost of doing business. And so they build that into it. My question would be, do you see any problem with, once that group is notified and there is positive notification, changing the penalty provision to a per day so that it has some teeth?
Mr. Chairman.
Director Schoen.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire. I guess ultimately that would really be a decision of this committee here. As far as what kind of teeth we could have, the only complexity to it is in reaching out to an organization in this scenario. We don't know if it's exceeded that 500 or that 1,000. They would know that, and so at some point there is a with anything campaign finance related, really, are they being honest about what they're doing? And so short of that information being known, it'd be hard to put some teeth in, to put their feet to the fire, if you will. If it were known that it was in access, if we were to receive some kind of proof of a particular ad or mailers that were sent, and we can see that it's in access, then that is certainly something that could be, written into the law. Of course, this bill doesn't address that, but it's really up to the committee here. So,
Senator Scott.
Chairman, question, there are federal political action organizations. Am I right in thinking that they are beyond our reach to regulate, and the feds regulate them, and there is disclosure there at the federal level? Is that correct, or does this catch those and put additional reporting requirements on them?
Mr. Schoen.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, the federal organizations, if we're talking about those that form like PACs, like the super PACs, all of that would still happen at the Federal Election Commission with the FEC. So that wouldn't funnel down into reporting with our state, similar to how the national party reports at the federal level or any other federal type PAC. So
Senator Scott.
So there isn't an explicit exception for the federal organizations, but am I right in thinking that they have preempted our regulation of those and they take care of that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, you're absolutely right.
Question, Mr. Schoen, on the effective date of the act. And so depending on the race, certainly for our statewide coming up this year, legislative, we're going to file before then. Any concern that the effective date of this act is July 1st in the middle of the election period? Most of these come kind of later, right by election time, but with the statewide elections, you might have some before then. Any inconsistency we should be aware of?
Mr. Chairman, that's an excellent question. And really the effective date could be sooner than that. It could certainly be at the time of if it were to move forward and be signed into law. At that time, it would be sufficient and might be a better idea given what you just presented, with activity taking place before and then after the effective date. And so I think that would be advantageous.
Would you think about what the correct date might be that would work for your office and the election cycle? If we come back at the appropriate time to amend that, I'll give you some time, but Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with regard to the amount that you need to find out from the party, would you recommend, or would there be a way to change the presumption on page number 2? And I would bring into example a sales tax audit for those of us who have enjoyed one of those. When the sales tax auditors come in, they presume that you have collected sales tax, and it's your burden to show them how much you have collected and to show them that you've paid your sales tax and pass that on. Would it be possible to change the presumption that if there's a mail out, if someone has a physical piece of evidence in their hand, this went out, I don't know how many people it went out to. Could be one, it could be 500,000, maybe every household in Wyoming. I don't have any way as the person who's the subject of that mail out to show in any way, shape, or form. You and your office don't have any way, shape, or form. The presumption should be on the party, at least in my mind, the presumption should be on that party that if they mailed it out to 2 of their friends, that's very different than if they went down to a commercial mail out house and did blanketed the state. The presumption, in my opinion, should be on them to show you whether or not they met this threshold. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thoughts on that, Mr. Schoen?
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, that question I would probably defer to LSO or another attorney to think through. But you're absolutely right. The recipient or our office does not have that information. Short of requiring them to prove it, we wouldn't know. I don't know if there'd be constitutional issues with that, any type of, if that would come into play here. So I don't know how to answer that. I understand what you're saying, but I think I would maybe defer that to LSO.
LSO, any immediate thoughts? You want to think about it some more? Or go ahead, Mr. Hopkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as immediate thoughts on the presumption there, I would need to take a little bit of time to look at that and make sure there aren't any other issues that don't arise on its face. So I guess at this point, I don't have a solid answer.
Okay, other questions for the Senator's case?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Schoen. Just kind of a technical question about, we separate out in this bill the activities relating to a ballot proposition. You sort of get, the trigger for the bill starts when you collect $1,000 to begin to pursue some kind of a ballot proposition. I guess pursue or attack a ballot proposition. And yet the other triggers don't have a specific, it's kind of two different triggers, and help me why we need two different triggers and we can't use the same one. Say the $1,000 is the same one. Or
Mr. Trump.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, in regards to that, the $1,000 trigger for organizations that are participating specifically in First Amendment right type activity, it's a lot of other states have those type of thresholds for organizations, I think primarily so that it's not so egregious. Why we don't apply it to the, I think we're talking about on page 3, the first formation there of an organization, because that one has does not have this $1,000 threshold in there, because those are organizations that would, possibly be supporting or opposing a ballot proposition, and so their threshold is 0. And so the 1,000 right just comes in for these independent expenditures, electioneering communications. And why I can't answer the why. I do know that it was a bill passed in 2019 when electioneering communications came to be in our law. And at that time, it was brought in at 500. I think it was at 1,000. I think it was all kind of all over the place.
Sure.
But
so Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm just wondering why we would have a different threshold for this type of political activity versus other, and I don't have the answer to that. The second question is more, I guess, more getting at this bill. There's a current court action between the Secretary of State's office and Wyoming gun owners, I believe. It's ongoing. I know that there's been some orders issued by the court back in September, if I remember right. And I know that feels to me like that's a reason why, part of the reason we're doing this bill, when you read about this, and it's about non-reported expenditures by this organization that the Secretary of State's office is challenging. And so I always like to wait for court things to kind of finish out before we start meddling with the law. But so the court is going to interpret our existing law, and they haven't done it yet, although they have issued at least one order so far. And so how does this all roll together? The court is looking at something, evaluating under the old law. We're kind of changing this law at the same time. Are we reacting to the court? Are we anticipating the court? Or is it totally separate from the court? Because it seems connected to me.
Mr. Schoen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, that particular case, of course, is still in the middle of the process and can't really speak to that. This idea, if you will, about organizations forming, that's the only piece that's new here since the case we're discussing. And so they've always had to file, well, since 2019. And so it's not even so much of as a reaction, if you will, but it has been something I would just say that we've discussed internally for a while. Like, we have organizations, we look in our campaign finance guide, it says there's no definition of what they are. They don't have to form, they're on their own. And so it was a way of being transparent. It just seemed the activity in the election world today that maybe now was the time. So not as much of a reaction, but maybe not as quick of a proactive approach.
Okay. Other questions for the elections director? Not seeing any from anyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Schoen.
Thank you.
We'll take some public comment now. Let me start with the county clerks, see if they have any concerns or issues. If so many of them still here. On the internet, we have Mr. Or did he go? Mr. Chestick, it is all you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Zwanitzer. I'm Ken Chestick from Laramie. I am the president of Wyoming Promise, which I think most of you are familiar with, an organization that is trying to work on the problems of dark money in our politics here. And I speak generally in favor of this bill. I think it's a good bill. It does some good things, but I have a question. There's something that appears to be missing from it. If you recall, I spoke to this committee by Zoom at the meeting in Sheridan in September. In the minutes of that meeting, and this is to follow up on something that Representative McGuire mentioned a moment ago, the minutes from that meeting say that the committee amended this bill to bring in section 22.5-108 F1 and amend it to, quote, require a civil penalty of $500 per day for failing to file a report. And that was approved by the committee. I know that Senator Case had raised some objection to how broad it might be and whether it would apply to some small candidate committees. But the whole bill was then passed with only Senator Scott objecting to the motion. But I think that Senator Scott's objections can be redressed by some language indicating that the $500 per day is a penalty intended to be applied to independent expenditure organizations. But my main question, my main point is, I don't see that in this bill, in this draft. It was supposed to be added to this draft by the vote at the Sheridan meeting in September, and I don't see it in the current draft. So that's my question, and I would very strongly support making sure that what was voted in September is actually added in to the bill that goes to the full Senate or the full legislature in the next session. Thank you. I'll stand for questions.
Okay, let me first check with Mr. Hopkinson on that request and see what happened to it, and then we'll keep you up for questions. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there may be just some confusion about what the committee has done and what they've already done. This is actually the second bill from the Secretary of State's office that the committee's looking at. The first that's being referenced was the campaign reports amendments 22 LSO 55. The committee did vote to sponsor that bill, and they did add in a provision that does amend 22.5-108 F paragraph 1, requiring that in that definition, or where that currently says that they would pay $500 for a failure to file a report with the Secretary of State, it now would say $500 per day, beginning on the date of the final order and ending when the report is filed, for a failure to file a report with the Secretary of State. So that would apply to reports that are required to be filed just with the Office of the Secretary of State. It doesn't apply to county clerk positions, but that was something that the committee did, and that is in that bill that's already sponsored.
And hopefully that answered your question, Mr. Chestick. I do remember we immediately put forward that bill because we didn't think we had any other amendments forthcoming. Questions for Mr. Chestick? Seeing none. Thank you very much for being here today, Ken. It's nice seeing you.
Thank you.
Next up, Steve Klein from the Wyoming Liberty Group. The floor is yours, Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, members of the committee. By way of introduction, my name is Steve Klein. I'm here today on behalf of the Wyoming Liberty Group. I worked for Y Liberty in Cheyenne from 2010 to 2015 full-time. I have been in the swamp of DC since 2015. I work full-time nationwide on a variety of free speech issues, particularly in litigation. I did cut my teeth in campaign finance law, and they are, well, I think they're kind of sharp. So my work right now actually has two different lawsuits in the state arising from the state of Wyoming. One has been mentioned by Senator Case. The other is currently on appeal in the 10th Circuit after winning a federal ruling in Cheyenne against the 100-yard no electioneering buffer zone that Wyoming puts around polling places on election day. Both of those instances, I should add, I come to this committee, I will offer testimony, I will give you my opinion before I go off and file any lawsuits. And that is, I will continue to do that whether you listen or not. So to To kind of addressing some of the commentary here, this is strictly a registration bill that's before you. The idea here is not really about the actual reports that need to be filed by politically engaged organizations. This is really a kind of an advanced, and Mr. Schoen, I think, described it pretty well, that this is just about when you engage in politics, register with the Secretary of State so that they know that you might have something to report later. Where it gets awkward in the lawsuit, and I did provide a copy via email to this committee, where the lawsuit in question takes that next step, is kind of a reaffirmation of the last 40 years or so of campaign finance law. And I know this, I believe it will come as maybe a surprise to some members of this committee. But the fact of the matter is, an organization that engages under Wyoming law in electioneering communications or independent expenditures, even a lot of them, does not necessarily have to report all of its donors, constitutionally speaking. That's not a Citizens United issue. That's actually going way back to the 1980s. The organization that engages mostly in political stuff, particularly legislative issues, say gun rights, say pro-life stuff. If they happen to put out a voting guide, that doesn't subject all of their donors to public reporting. And the reason for that is because if they don't have the major purpose of engaging in elections, their donors may be giving for any number of reasons that have nothing to do with the election. It's kind of a double-edged, it's kind of an exception to transparency that it could actually be confusing or even non-informative by putting names out there in the public as supporting an organization that is not necessarily in support of their electoral activity. This kind of goes to the part of where the opinion stands now in the case. And again, I totally understand we're still in litigation. We're entering discovery. We expect to have a summary judgment ruling, hopefully by the middle of next year. But the idea right now under Wyoming campaign finance law is saying that, oh, if you take out an electioneering communication, you need to report the donations that relate to that electioneering communication. That's been uniformly struck down as vague in a lot of other courts. And it's just not really holding up under the current requirements of tailoring under the First Amendment. And that's where it gets kind of funny, is that, let me say this, that if my client in that case, the gun rights organization, had even filed the report for which it was fined $500 for not filing, there really would not have been anything to put in that report. They don't have earmarked donations, which is the only appropriate way of having reports like this, unless you're a political committee. I've probably already gone off into a very confusing jargon there, and I apologize. But the point is, it's that this is a very complex area of the law, and I know you've all had to address some real intricacies with redistricting, and this is really no less important than that. So turning to the bill, I did put in written testimony here, and I certainly could lean on that. I just think there is a huge problem on pages 3 and 4 of the bill, parts 2 and 3 of these registration requirements, requiring an organization, initiative and referendum organization to register with the government, even if it's only raised as little as $1, probably raises some serious constitutional problems. Part 3, even making them register just because they intend to cause sometime in the future an independent expenditure, electioneering communication, probably also constitutionally problematic. And both of these issues, I'd say you have to keep in mind if you're tracking campaign finance, political spending, election spending, you got to track the money. It can't be just political activity. I have real concerns that this could lead to complaints against a bunch of citizens forming a Facebook group, especially when you have no spending thresholds. Someone might argue, hey, you made a Facebook post and hey, you're paying for your internet service, so you had to report with the government. Now, you might think that's crazy, but unfortunately, I've seen it happen in other states, and I've seen complaints, and I've seen that all sorts of nonsense nationwide. So that's kind of just the broad strokes. I think this bill, the current bill, does need minimum amendments of serious amendments to page 3, lines 9 to page 4, lines 8 at a minimum. Otherwise, I do think it's a good idea raising, as they pointed out on page 9, raising the actual reporting thresholds to $1,000. Having said that, it's within that provision that's being amended is the area that the federal court has expressed is probably unconstitutional by requiring the reporting of contributions that merely relate to an electioneering communication or an independent expenditure. So with that, thank you for your time. I'll happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Any questions from the committee for Steve? I'm not seeing you today, Mr. Klein, but as always, thank you for being here and good to see you. In the legislative room, not in a courtroom, litigating us for something. All right, great. Other public comment in the audience? Seeing no one stepping forward, let me make sure no one else on the internet. No one else raising their hand in the room. Any further comment or questions from the committee on the bill before I close public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed on LSO draft 56. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Representative McGuire. Seconded by Representative Blackburn. Are there amendments? Discussion? Representative McGuire, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would like to discuss with the committee on page number 2, lines number 10 and 11, removing the amount of $1,000. So it would simply be any organization that receives, contributes, or expends funds. That would be the baseline, because as we heard from the Secretary of State's office, anytime that there is an amount, then there's always a question. There's always the ability to, well, we didn't spend more than that. This would be, the presumption would be that if you are receiving funds, that at that point, receiving or expending funds, then at that point, you're required to file. Now that filing may be, that it's just a filing and there's no requirement other than that. Or as the amount goes up, it may become more onerous.
Is that a motion, Representative McGuire?
That is a motion.
Okay, is there a
Thank you.
second? Is there a second? Seconded by Yin. Mr. Schoen, can I bring you back up here again? I just have a question about how the process currently works or does work, because I know we do have independent expenditures, not a whole lot that are currently listed. So hypothetically, when it's $1,000 threshold, how would you confirm that? You would ask the entity to confirm that. You would say, we know that a Facebook ad that hits 10,000 people costs about this much. If they said we haven't spent $1,000, how would you prove they have? How do you prove they've hit that threshold?
Mr. Chairman, that's a very difficult question, but a very good question. And short of, again, receiving any voluntary information about what they expended on that particular independent expenditure or electioneering communication, we wouldn't know, other than asking the question, letting them know this is what the law says. Now, this is the penalty if later on we find out that it met that threshold. But short of that, there's not a way to dig into their finances that I know of.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry to jump in front of the good senator. To the Secretary of State's office, are you aware of any case law, whether state or federal, that sets a financial minimum, $500, $1,000? Is there, are you familiar with anything like that? Thank you.
Mr. Schoen.
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, there is case law that I wouldn't be probably the best one to speak of, but that's taken place in Colorado. And my understanding is that it really does preserve that $1,000 threshold. I do know that there's 11 states currently, 13 states that have the $1,000 threshold. 11 states have greater than $1,000 threshold. And there's actually 24 states that have less than $1,000 thresholds. So it's kind of all over the gamut, but
President McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that just begs the question on the states that have less than $1,000, do they have no threshold, or are there any states that have no threshold?
Mr. Schoen, if you know.
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, there are states that have no threshold. Anywhere from 0 to 250 to 500 to 750.
Senator Scott, question?
Mr. Chairman, it would seem to me that in some of the cases, it'd be fairly easy to get the evidence. They put an ad in the newspaper, you get the newspaper's rate card and just measure how big it is. And if it's big enough, you know they went over. I think the electronic media, the traditional ones, I think there's federal requirements for reporting there, aren't there, that you can access a public file and find that out. I know there are for candidates, or were. I think it probably applies to these too. It seemed to me the difficulties would be in a mailing where you'd have to see a lot of it or figure out who did the mailing and talk to them but some kind of electronic thing. Trying to get an electronic ad where you're paying by amount unless you get cooperation from Facebook or whoever you're buying it on would be, Mr. Chairman, I think more difficult, would it not? Would it, depending on where it was, wouldn't you catch some of them and not others?
Mr. Schoen?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I think you're absolutely right. That's just the nature of it. Some are more readily available, others are not.
Follow up, Senator Scott.
And with regard to having a threshold, it would seem to me that what you're doing is avoiding the case where somebody takes this to an extreme, gets after somebody who's mailed a letter to a bunch of friends and incurred some expense, but nothing great, Mr. Chairman, or avoid the instance where somebody tried to enforce it against somebody who just posted something on the internet and wasn't expending great amounts of money. I think having a threshold is, Mr. Chairman, is a good idea, and would welcome any comments from the Secretary of State as to what they would see if they didn't have a threshold.
Sure, Mr. Schoen, or why did you set the threshold at 1,000? Is that at our, or is that the state at national average?
Chairman Swanitzer, sir. Senator Scott, as far as the $1,000, it was again something that, as we had heard about the case happening in Colorado, as well as what other states were doing, trying to strike a good balance when you're dealing with organizations, because it's very litigious, as we know. As far as what would happen if we did not have a threshold, I think is what you were asking. Historically, since 2012, we've been getting reports about only independent expenditures. We haven't yet had one for electioneering communications. But in regards to independent expenditures, we've had a total of 7 organizations that have filed since 2012. And in many of those election years, the same organization has filed, but in total, 7 different organizations. And 0 of those filings are less than 1,000.
So would I be correct, just because I know we've cut your budget significantly, you don't actually have any, well, time or capability internal to go out and look for these? You only hear about an electioneering communication if there's a complaint brought historically or during election season. Is there any kind of tracking about this, or is it only when complaints come into you?
Mr. Chairman, you hit the nail on the head. We don't have an investigator. We don't have an attorney in our office. We don't have that capacity.
Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm kind of trying to dial in on the implications of this bill and following the word organization. Organization has a definition in the bill, but I would submit that it's really, really broad. Organization means any corporation, partnership, trade union, professional association, or civic, fraternal, or religious group, or other profit or nonprofit entity, stop there for a second. A sole proprietorship is a for-profit entity. Or any other entity influencing an election. And then there's an exception, except a candidate's campaign committee, political action committee, or political party. So I think it comes down to this. An organization is an individual is an organization under this definition. An individual is an entity that may want to have influence some political outcome. And so I get all tangled up in the free speech actions of an individual. If you have a custom made yard sign that's 10 feet tall, illuminated, says vote no on this, and put it in front of your house and you pay for it individually, are you an entity? If it costs $1,227? If you go to coffee with your buddies and you go pool some money and say, let's take out an ad to attack that. And I think with respect to a ballot proposition, there's no limit whatsoever on what you spend. So this seems very broad to me. Tell me how it's limited and why it doesn't get into free speech.
Okay, Mr. Schoen, or if you want to, we can have LSO try to answer it as well, but go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, Senator Case, I'm having a hard time this morning. It is again, a good question because it is very broad, and that was initially the intent. It really used language already in the statutes when just talking about corporations and organizations and trade unions, which is why it's being struck in other parts of that bill just to conform to that definition. And so, yes, certainly in regards to free speech as an individual, and it could certainly, defer to, to LSO, but an individual has, as I understand, those First Amendment rights to do that type of activity. They would not be, required then to have to form as an individual. They would still, in many cases, be required to still disclose within whatever literature it is that they're doing, who they are. But I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but it could certainly use a bit more research and get back to the committee with something a little more succinct and holistic.
Senator Scott.
Chairman, and I would inquire of the attorneys of the LSO, but as I read organization definition on page 4, lines 12 through 17, it looked to me carefully crafted to exclude individuals. That was the big, if they'd had individuals in it, you'd be asking what's different from the person definition in Title 8. But the way this is written, I think it's carefully written to exclude individuals.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure, go ahead, Senator Case.
I'm not sure because it says, or any other entity influencing an election. But suppose even individuals are excluded, you still have all sorts of entities that would be, you could have two people, they're no longer individuals, pool their money to do something. Now they're an organization and it's just to take out a newspaper ad or put up a sign. But I'm anxious to hear what the LSO thinks if this excludes individuals, because I just don't see it.
So LSO, if you have thoughts, and we'll get to Representative Greer in just a second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly think the intent here is not to include individuals within this definition of organization. I can certainly see where the concern may arise with that any other entity. And if there is great concern there that might apply to an individual, that language I think could be taken out without doing much damage to this.
Still on this topic, go ahead, Senator Case.
So let's write the words in here that say excluding individuals. Then you have the situation where an individual has free reign, but also that it begs the question of any combination of individuals.
And let me check.
You and
with-
I go to coffee together, we put money in a hat, and we're an organization now.
I'm going to check with Chairman Greer real fast if he's jumping in on this topic.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Case has put his fingers on what's been troubling me with this. And I didn't have the advantage of hearing the prior discussions, being new to the committee. But, one, I'm concerned about removing the threshold. Two, this definition of organization and other entity, and Senator Case is absolutely right. Two people are now a partnership, and you don't even have to have a written agreement on that. I mean, and then when you move back up to page 3 in line 17, okay, any organization with no threshold that's in there. So that means, for example, I don't know, the unvaccinated hospital workers of Washoe County run a newspaper ad supporting me, right? They're supposed to have reported or they violated the law.
All right, Senator Scott, adding in. Go ahead.
Different question, same area. Page 4, line 14, religious group. It looks to me like this explicitly captures things like the Catholic Church that put out signs that are expenditures in a particular issue, and they do. Do we run afoul of the First Amendment here?
Mr. Hopkinson, any more to offer on thoughts on if there's a way to incorporate that in the bill, if we need to make amendments, if it's an area we can research before session? How would you like to proceed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of the above, is that? Some of that language, and I was just double checking through the statute, because I think a lot of these concerns being expressed are already in statute. That's something that these groups already have to do. And so this isn't so much a change, it's just clarifying who it applies to. So the religious organizations are already captured under existing law. And they would have to, at least as far as if they're making political expenditures in an amount greater than $500, they would have to report those expenditures. And that, I think, is something that has been upheld under existing law. In certain circuits, I do think there's still some issues there that haven't quite been firmly addressed, at least within the 10th Circuit. But where the committee wants to go with that is certainly up to the committee, but.
Okay, Senator Boner,
That's what I have.
jump on in.
Well, sure. And just, it's my understanding, having been, I guess, married to a church employee, that the line, at least when it comes to say your tax exempt status, is that you can advocate for an issue that you believe in, but you cross the line when you advocate for a candidate. And so I guess the other question in this page 4 line, paragraph 4, is what qualifies as influencing an election. That's the other element. And does issue advocacy count towards true political advocacy, or are you just saying what you believe without endorsing a particular candidate? So that might be additional nuance we want to pay attention to. And I don't know the answer to it. I just have anecdotal experience.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Nethercutt.
I think the primary concern there for that nonprofit religious organization is their tax exempt status with the IRS. And it really is an IRS determination for that concern. I think as applied to this bill, correct me if I'm wrong, Alice or Mr. Sean, whether or not this only applies during a campaign, right? And so it has to be a campaign cycle during a general or a primary. And as Senator Case has pointed out, a ballot proposition. So thinking just kind of broadly, of course, the law already says this, so we're not doing anything new, but theoretically, a church provides for a billboard that's pro-life. Do they need to report that? And I would think not. So any of those, that it's not going to a ballot initiative, right? That is not regarding a primary or a general campaign. It's just a general, position that they are communicating out, and it's not associated necessarily with a campaign. So those concerns I don't think are warranted or related to this bill. I would say back on the motion, on the amendment, on that $1,000 threshold. I have a piece of that that's related, I guess maybe back on track to that motion. Whether or not the concept associated with signing under penalty of perjury, because the concern that the Secretary of State has expressed was there's no way for us to know if they have expended any dollar amount, whether it's $5 or $1,000. Do you think there's any merit to the penalty of perjury concept to Secretary of State or members of the committee?
Mr. Schoen, I guess it might be a political, but if you want to offer your thoughts from your experience, certainly do.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, adding that type of language in there, I don't think that it hurts us at all. I don't, it's, yeah.
Senator Scott, no, good. All right, we're still on the motion for taking out the $1,000 and not having a threshold. Further discussion on that motion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. All those opposed? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That motion has failed. Back on the bill. Senator Scott.
Apologize for jumping in the religious groups before we disposed of the motion. But I am a little concerned about that. Frankly, I could see my church, which is on the other side, writing out to its mailing list members, and they aren't all members and non-members, but people they have on their mailing list, and saying, don't vote for so-and-so because he's pro-life. Because they're on the other side. Is that an electioneering thing that would cause them to have to register?
Mr. Schoen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I need to look back at the definition of electioneering communication per se, because I believe notifications or mailing sent to members are excluded from that.
And Mr. Chairman, I was aware of that.
Yeah.
But I'm also aware of the state of the mailing list that my church uses, and it isn't all members.
Further discussion or amendments on the bill before us? Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So going to the end of the bill, and I would ask for LSO to work a little magic because I don't have the language written out, but I would ask that the bill refer to the penalty provision. And in prior testimony, I think that we had some people had the wrong number. I believe it's 22-25-108. It would be the appropriate penalty provision. With regard to that penalty provision, that once notification has been made or communication has been confirmed with the group, that 5 days after that, the penalty provision would become per day. So if it's a $500 initial penalty with $200 thereafter, that would become, after the group has been notified, 5 days after that, it would become a daily fine.
So that amendment has been seconded. Mr. Hopkinson, can you track that in quickly?
I just, Mr. Chairman, I want to review with the committee. I suppose it may be helpful to review what the change was in 22 LSO 55, and not to say that we couldn't apply something similar to this bill. But that bill now has a provision in 22-25-108F amending paragraph 1. So where it would require, it now would say $500 per day beginning on the date of the final order and ending when the report is filed for a failure to file a report with the Secretary of State. Now, section F has provisions where it would give that essentially they send notice, then they've got 21 days from the date of that notice to send a final order. And then after receipt of that final order, this $500 fine kick in. So that's how it would work under that bill draft. So there is that change there. Again, that would apply if they have to file with the Secretary of State, and they don't. So if we want to do something different here, that certainly whatever the committee wants to do. But I just wanted to remind you that has been done to that extent in that other bill.
Does that change the intent of your motion, all Representative McGuire, or you still wish to proceed?
Well, I still wish to proceed with it as stated. Thank you.
So Mr. Hopkinson, does that like on the fly, can you come up with something, or we can conceptually have that amendment drafted and put in the bill, as the bill will probably need a vote as a committee bill today? And perhaps we could give you over the lunch hour as well, if that would be helpful.
Mr. Chairman, that would be helpful, at least to provide clear language to the committee and so that it's clear what those requirements will be.
Okay. So let's put that motion on hold. I technically not asking to rescind it, but anybody else have motions coming forward they want to discuss before lunch on this bill? We could vote on the motion to have it drafted, and then before we vote on the bill after lunch, we could see what that language looks like.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Greer is holding his hand.
Greer. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 3, line 18, I would move after the word expenditure, insert in excess, or excuse me, or greater than $1,000, and then strike or electioneering communication.
Good. And so we did have a motion on the table that we're going to suspend, if that's okay for a second, Representative McGuire. It's not tabled, it's just, we'll just suspend it. We're going to go on to this motion on page 3, line 18, putting that $1,000 limit and making it specific only to independent expenditures and not electioneering communications. I'll go ahead and second that. Do you want to further explain, Representative Greer, where you're going?
Again, Mr. Chairman, I think we get into the difficulties of what is an entity. Again, a loose association of people, friends at the coffee shop. And I think by putting in a threshold here, we can at least avoid some of that unintended consequences of citizens speaking. It requires some effort to organize to raise $1,000 to influence an election. So that's my thought on that. It's maybe not the most eloquent fix to an underlying concern, but I think it does help.
LSO, is that, you understand how to functionally make that work in that section? Or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I actually want to address something that I think may change what Representative Greer is seeking here. And that's just with the way that the bill is structured. I would point out subsection C, which is the head of all of this, requires that the organization that receives contributions or expends in excess of $1,000 for those purposes has to file this statement. Paragraph 2 is a subset of that subsection. And so that $1,000 would apply, well, to paragraph 3, and I think would apply to paragraph 2 as well, the way this is currently drafted. I think there may have been some interpretation that it would not apply to the ballot propositions, and that would be true if it were a separate subsection. But the way it's currently drafted, that $1,000 limit would appear to be applicable to both paragraphs 2 and paragraphs 3 already. So if Representative Greer wants to make that amendment, it would likely fit better up in subsection C, but I just wanted to point that out to the committee.
Representative Greer, do you want to think about, did you hear Mr. Hopkinson's?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm reading that, and we left $1,000 in C, so we let me withdraw if I can my motion, and I need to review the statute if we got time later.
Sure. Representative Yin, you have an amendment as well?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend the enactment date to effective immediately upon passage into law.
Is there a second? Seconded by McGuire. Any discussion on changing the enactment date to immediately upon effective of the bill? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, question for the maker of the motion. How would you feel? I really reluctant to put an immediate effective date where a private organization can get hit theoretically the day after the governor signs something. How would you feel about a date certain like April 1st, which is a much tighter date, but would give some time for the word to get out that this was a new law and in effect?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Representative Yin.
I am amenable to that as a friendly amendment if the second is.
And McGuire seconded it. He seems amenable. And then Mr. Schoen, I will ask, because I kind of mentioned, if there is a better date in your mind to have this go into enactment?
Mr. Chairman, I think April 1st is just fine.
So the motion table is to make the bill effective April 1st, 2022. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of that motion, raise your hand. Okay, that motion is passed. At this time, I know LSO might work on Representative McGuire's conceptual amendment at this point that's slightly on the table for consideration after lunch. Representative Greer is going to continue to research where his amendment might best fit. You have a question before the lunch hour? Senator Nethercutt.
That's very quick. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The word independent, for example, on line 11 on page 2, an independent expenditure. What does that mean, independent? How is that supposed to apply, or should it just be an expenditure? What's the significance of independent?
I think I got that one, maybe.
All right, Senator Case.
It means it's not coordinated with the campaign committee. It's a solid third party. That's the Citizens United basis, was independent expenditures.
Mr. Schoen, anything you want to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And on page 10 of the bill, it does have the definition that currently exists in the statutes about independent expenditure. It's in the comments. And it's exactly as.
Mr. Hopkins, and that was what you're going to say? Okay, so with that committee, let's break for lunch until 1:45. And we'll come back, finish up this bill hopefully quickly. If over lunch LSO can structure Representative McGuire's amendment in a, I don't know if you can email it to us so we can see the verbiage. And then we'll come back as well to Chairman Greer's motion and thoughts on perhaps another amendment. So with that, we'll be in recess till 1:45.